400 Years Celebration, Inc. announces its first United Universal Dialogue, a conversation about Africa and African people around the world, Thursday, December 17th through Saturday, December 19th, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. You may join us via live stream on Facebook and YouTube at 400 Years Celebration or visit our website at www.400yearscelebration.org. Special guests include Bishop Seth Olarte, founder and CEO of 400 Years Celebration, Inc., Bishop Adam J. Richardson, Senior Bishop of the AME Church, Bishop Lawrence Reddick, Senior Bishop of the CME Church, Bishop Kenneth Monroe, Presiding Prelate of the Eastern North Carolina Episcopal District of the AME Zion Church, and Bishop William Barber of the Repairers of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign, along with Dr. Jonathan Weaver, Pan African Collective, Dr. Julius Garvey, Ms. Raina Cotterville, Ms. Janine Scott, and many more. Join us for this important conversation Thursday, December 17th through Saturday, December 19th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time via social media at 400 Years Celebration. For more information, contact Dr. Kathy Thomas McFadden at katmcfadden@yahoo.com. That's KATMCFADDEN@yahoo.com.
Good morning, good morning, and welcome to day 3 of United Universal Dialogue. We are so happy that you are here with us. We want to especially thank those who have been with us all 3 days of this rich and engaging conversation. Hasn't it been amazing? I'm sure you've learned some things. I've learned some things. We've met some wonderful people on day 1, which was Thursday. Our theme was understanding the health and educational disparities among Africans worldwide and the need for a greater connection. And we had our senior statesman on, Mr. Mel Foote, Dr. Julius Garvey. We had some interesting conversations that day. And then on day 2, Friday, we had our young people came and shared their passion based on the theme, the need for an economic wealth and community development initiative. And boy, were they passionate and talkative and engaging. So we need all generations engaged in this United Universal Dialogue. I mean, we have had some good stuff. And we come to day 3, and we come with some heavy hitters today. And I am so excited about what day 3 is going to bring. Today's theme, enhancing Africa's infrastructure to ensure an impactful future. We've got Bishop Larte, who will come in a few minutes, Dr. Jonathan Weaver, Bishop Lawrence Reddick, Bishop Adam J. Richardson, Bishop Kenneth Monroe. We've got Mr. Eugene Faison and some others. And so we're excited about what this day brings. And so today and the other days has not just been about having a conversation, but it's been about having a conversation for a call to action so that we can move forward. We're not just talking to be talking, we're talking so that we can begin to create, as we talked about the other day, our 100-year strategic plan And we're excited about how that's shaping up. We're excited about the partnerships that we're beginning to develop with some of our new friends that we have met over the last few days. And we're just excited that you are joining us. Some of you have been with us all 3 days, and so we are excited about that. And so I'm going to encourage you, those of you who are on social media, Facebook, YouTube, to go ahead and start a watch party. Go ahead and share the video and the website so that others may join us for this engaging and enriching conversation. And for those who don't do social media, you may go to our webpage, share with your friends, our webpage at www.400yearscelebration.org. And you can see us. And of course, all of our recordings will be made available at a later date. We are recording this because basically this is history. This is history for all of these entities who have a passion and a heart for working for Africa and all things Africa and African peoples around the world. This is a first of conversations that are bringing all of these people together. And so we dare not miss the opportunity to watch this again, see this again, share this with others who have similar likes and passions when it comes to Africa. 400 Years Celebration, for those of you who may not know, was created so that we could bring various entities together, athletics, politics, entertainment, education, the gamut, to begin to celebrate the accomplishments. We know that 401 years ago, when Africans were taken from their country and brought over here and enslaved, that was a travesty. That was a travesty. But since we've been here, 401 years, since we've been here, we've made many accomplishments. Some of the things that you enjoy every day that you cannot live without were created by African Americans. And so this organization was created to celebrate those accomplishments, but also to create awareness, to begin to educate our young people. We all realize that not all of our history is taught in school, and so it becomes our responsibility, as Ambassador Eric Hanna and others have said the other day, it becomes our responsibility to begin to teach and to share and to awaken African Americans in this country to our rich history, and then to begin to bridge the gap so that we know what's going on over in Africa, and so that we can begin to help one another as we grow. We're a powerful people here and there, but others have tried to convince us that we are not. We are not, but we know that we are. And so it's my pleasure to present to us this morning, who will make his own comments and several introductions, our CEO and founder of 400 Years Celebration. I often call him our fearless and visionary leader. And I do that because he's fearless. He doesn't fear anything or anybody. When it comes to an idea, he's just it comes, he goes to work, and he gets it done. And he is a visionary. He sees farther than the average person sees. And so aren't we glad about it? Because this was his vision, not only 400 years, but being able to come together and to have this dialogue with people who are working on the continent and here on behalf of the continent. He is the 100th bishop in the line of succession in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and he happens to preside over the Alabama-Florida Episcopal District. And so it's my happy pleasure and privilege and honor to present the Right Reverend Bishop Seth O. Sibisai Lartey, who will come and greet us and make introductions. Bishop?
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. McFadden. And I said to the people in Alabama that the first quadrennium, the O in my initials or in my name was not going to be disclosed, but that in the second half we will do that. And since we've done that, it has been my joy to hear them call that name. But certainly this morning, I want to acknowledge our missionary supervisor, Mrs. Jacqueline Inez Williams-Lante. We certainly want to acknowledge the presence of Bishop Richardson, Bishop Monroe, and all other ministers who are with us this morning. At this particular time, I want to just take a moment to present Bishop Lawrence Reddick. Bishop Lawrence Reddick is the 51st bishop elected in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. Bishop Reddick could not be with us physically this morning. He has sent us a message because of death in his life. His father in the ministry is being buried even as we are here this morning. And that was the only reason why Bishop Reddick is not here with us. But he is assigned to the 10th Episcopal area that includes Jamaica and Haiti. But with all of what one could say about Bishop Reddick, I want you to know that he is the senior bishop of the CME Church, one who is extremely humble, very, very efficient. We got to meet Bishop Reddick on a more up-close level when we served in West Africa, especially during the period of the Ebola crisis. And as a result of that crisis, we came together, the CME, AME, AMEZ, at the time with Bishop Few, Bishop Ennis of the United Methodist Church, Bishop Frencher of the AME Zion Church, and we formed what we called the West Africa Methodist Collaborative. And as a result of that collaborative, we're able to raise enormous amounts of money to assist each of our respective denominations in responding to the atrocities brought about by the Ebola crisis. It was then and there that I discovered what a genuine leader Bishop Reddick is. One who loves God, loves God's people, very committed to progress, and whatever it is that has to do with the enhancement of human people, human lives, wherever you find them, Bishop Reddick can be found in that arena. And so it certainly gives me a great delight and pleasure to present him now via video to bless us with his meditation. Bishop Reddick.
When the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church elected me bishop in 1998 and sent me on my first 4-year assignment, that assignment was to serve the people of Jamaica, Haiti, Liberia, Ghana, and Nigeria. Before it was over, I was like Uncle Remus's rabbit in the briar patch. No other assignment since has been so simultaneously promising, challenging, intriguing, inspiring, and often disappointing. Working not only with the African CME congregations of West Africa, but also with those of the African diaspora in Haiti and Jamaica, I became much more aware of our kinships across the globe, and I've never been the same. My first tour, a fact-finding mission to acquaint myself and see the work, was planned as a 2-week trip to Jamaica first and then Haiti second. At that time, my father, now deceased, was living in Huntsville, Alabama. And as I neared the end of the first week in Jamaica, I called him one night to tell him how things were going. I reminded him that I would be returning that Saturday from Montego Bay to Miami and then flying out immediately to go to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. They were both parts of the same ticketed trip. But my father stopped the conversation. He said, "You can't go to Haiti next week." I reminded him that I could and I would. I already had the ticket. "No," he said, "there's a hurricane headed to Haiti. You can't go to Haiti next week." I was baffled. "Are you sure about a hurricane?" I said. "Yes," he answered. "I'm watching it here on the Weather Channel." My father was a retired pastor and worked for NASA, but his other love was horticulture and agriculture. And as he grew older in years and more feeble, he spent his days watching and listening to the Weather Channel. I knew he knew what he was talking about. The next day, I went to the airport in Montego Bay to change my ticket so that I would not go into Haiti in danger. But I had heard nothing on the television, and I was avidly watching CNN for the news every day. But I had heard nothing about a hurricane headed to Haiti. And when I got to the ticket counter at the airport and asked the clerk to help me change my ticket because a hurricane was headed to Haiti, her response was, "We haven't heard anything about a hurricane going to Haiti." She asked the clerks alongside her. No one knew about a hurricane headed to Haiti. She began to work the keys of her computer, and within a few minutes she said with surprise, "You're right. There is a hurricane headed to Haiti." She immediately then changed the ticket. She had not known. Her airline's executives had not sent out an alert about it. I had watched the news and the weather each day and knew nothing about it. It was just the old man watching the Weather Channel that kept me from embarking on a trip into a hurricane. That's when I learned that the Western world cares very little about Haiti, a country of the African diaspora. And as I began to delve deeper into the wonder of why, I realized that since 1804, when enslaved persons freed themselves in Haiti and overturned their masters, so to speak, Southern plantation owners in the U.S. did not want the word of the independence in Haiti to reach enslaved persons in the United States, and it still continues that way. If you notice, there's almost never good news out of Haiti. All of the news they give us from Haiti is bad news. And many of us in the United States, even Black people in the United States, have been very cautious and standoffish about Haitian immigrants and Haitian culture. But if you spend time around the Haitian people, you will find them among the world's most resilient and industrious, that is, hardworking and able people there are. From the very beginning, this United Universal Dialogue Conference has been informative and hopefully the beginning of a new day of partnerships. I like the way Melvin Foote said it. "I'm here to be a partner." Thursday was a great day of information. I can't speak about Friday because I'm taping this on Thursday night. I had planned to be with you live today, but since my commitment was made, my father in the ministry answered the eternal call, and his funeral is today, and I must be there. But here are a couple of questions for us as we talk about and plan for the future. What can we build on? And the answer for me is obvious with the text I've been given. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and the first part of verse 13. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. That's the New International Version. And the New Jerusalem Bible says, as it is, these remain: faith, hope, and love. These three things, I'm convinced, are essential to what we need to go forward. As we embark upon a venture of working together to restore Mother Africa to a place of prominent respect as we work together to impact infrastructure development and economic wealth. These tools are needed for us, and their uses need to be applied among us. In these verses, faith, hope, and love are lifted to us as God's divine gifts, given to us to live, to persist, to remain, to stay with us in our spirits. Or if I may say it the way I would were I preaching on a Sunday morning, they help us in our start and they carry us through. Our faith, our hope, and our love, they remain powerful throughout. That's the significance here of the Greek perfect tense in the word remain, last, abide. It's about an action begun in the past, whose effect continues through the present and forward. Some things take us only so far. That's the implication of the text, but they do not carry us all the way. A resume might get us in the door, but it does not assure that we will have a good interview. Nor does it promise that if we get on the job, we will be able to produce. But faith and hope and love are lifted as gifts from God that not only carry us to the door, but through the door and all the way into the next room. I want to suggest that faith and hope already have been proven mainstays for us as people of the African diaspora and for the people of Africa. It has been in our music, whether it's in the indigenous African songs or the American gospel songs or the blues or jazz. It's about us holding on, being resilient, determined to survive, and even moving forward. For those of us who are Christian believers, it's in the music of Precious Lord, Take My Hand. It's in the preaching about God delivering God's people out of Egypt. It's about God making a way out of no way, that is, no visible way. These are the things that have carried us and still can and will carry us through. These things remain, says the text. Faith, hope, love. These things abide. These things endure. This verb describes something that was done in the past, but which has effects that are permanent and continue into the present and the future. That makes this word describe an action that is enduring. Faith begins and keeps enduring. Hope begins and keeps enduring. Love begins and keeps enduring. Now, to be clear, faith, hope, love, these three are not the only things that began and continue to exist. We know that God's providence endures. We know that God's mercy endures. We know that God's grace endures. We know that God's truth endures. But this text has a context that is speaking, and I believe it is not so much unlike our own context. In the biblical context, God is using Paul to address the subject of things important to the life of Corinth, a gifted church, because a lot was going on that was not inspired by the gifts. And he is warning them that if they are not careful, they will end up focusing on things that are minor, and they will lose the major. Focus seems to always be problematic, but not impossible for us as a church people, as people in general. But I use the scripture to remind us that the people of the church then were very much like we are now. The we who are the children of Africa on the motherland and in the African diaspora. They had, and we have, issues of leadership. Some were following Peter's words, some Paul's, some the words of Jesus. They had, and we have, issues of morality. In Corinth, it was sexual immorality, but that's not the only kind of immoral actions. There are issues of integrity, issues of theft and of abuse. They had, and we have, issues about what is right and what is wrong, and agreeing upon them is hard. Their issues were about celebrating the Lord's Supper, about what foods to eat and not eat, or who is first at God's table. They had, and we have, issues about God's gifts. Rather than just receiving them, they had used them, some of them, as badges of pride. The gifts of tongues, the gifts of prophecy, the gifts of organization, and other gifts. For us, they are about us. The questions about who will get the spotlight, who will sit in the high seat at the president's table, who will get the call to go and meet with the president. Then and now it seems that the gifted become the preferred, the favored become the chosen, and the rest are left out. And these gifts in the church at Corinth had shattered their focus, had divided them. And as Paul, as pastor and teacher, talked to them, he had to check them. And he said, I will show you a more excellent way. And that is why he began chapter 13. Not because he wanted to just write a poem about love. No, he wanted to help a group struggling to work together, to see the glue, the cohesion, the strength that they needed to build in order to go through their issues to where they were trying to get to. If I speak in tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I'm just a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom mysteries and have all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames to be burned, but I have not love, I've gained nothing. Remember, this is a letter from a church leader to the group of people whom he loved because he pastored them. Love never fails. That means love doesn't give out. That means, in the sense of the word, it was used of flowers that wilt. Love doesn't wilt away. But where there are prophecies, they will stop. And you know, prophecy in the New Testament was very much about inspired preaching. Can you imagine the preacher saying preaching will be done away with one day? As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect will disappear. My brothers and my sisters, he contrasts those gifts that people were divided over with the gifts that last, with the gifts that can be depended upon, that will persist, that will endure, in fact, that will build the group up rather than highlight the individuals, that will carry us through the stages of design and implementation all the way to the finish line. All these will be the gifts of faith and hope and love. He's saying to the people of God, and I believe he's saying to us, that many of these various gifts from God do carry us so far. They give us some strength. They add to us some insights and wrap us into some picture of intelligence. But they are not necessarily the things that will count in the enduring eternal picture of what God is doing in our corporate lives when we link together. What will carry us beyond our individualism will be our faith, our hope, both in projects greater than we, and our love for each other with a sense of respect and dignity. My second trip to my work, or the second trips, the first were a series of site fact-finding missions, and the second were going back to hold annual conferences. And I remember going to Liberia to hold an annual conference. Annual conference, if you're not a Methodist, is the gathering of preachers and pastors and of lay delegates and others from the churches who come to conference to tell the stories of what they have accomplished during the last year. Only in the case of Liberia, it was not just 1 year. Because of civil war, they had not had an annual conference since 1991, until that meeting in 1999. But oh, if you could have seen the pride, the spirit of commitment, if you could have heard the joy in their singing and watched the joy in their dancing, if you could have recognized the stories of courage, not only told, but evidenced. One pastor had helped move his whole village in order to keep them safe during the war. In our case, as a denomination, in every non-US field, we have an indigenous leader whom we call the mission supervisor. He or she is the person who is really in charge when the bishop is absent, which is most of the time. The mission supervisor called me aside and asked me if we could take the time to hear the pastors call the names of persons in their congregations lost during the war. I told him yes, but I had no impact it would have. I had no sense of the impact it would have on us. It would be like what we will probably need to do in a few months from now, when the pandemic is over, when we have time to remember and grieve and mourn those whom we have been too busy and too limited in access to mourn. Listen, they talked about their faith, about their belief, about their confidence that God would sustain them through what they were going through. They talked about their struggles, their difficult circumstances, how when they were overwhelmed by physical diseases that challenged them and tried them and confronted them, they simply held on and prayed and trusted God and kept moving forward. And when they saw that God had a way of delivering them, not around the trouble, but through the trouble, they rejoiced when they were on the other side of it. Faith and hope were evidenced with great power. But the mission supervisor had asked me to give them the next gift, that superior gift, the willingness to stop our business meeting and listen to the people talk, listen to their hearts, their souls, their worn spirits that had been in battle for not just the number of months we have battled COVID, but in battle for 8 long years. And that listening required that other gift, the gift that is patient, the gift that is kind, the gift that is not condescending, the gift that is not so westernized that it belittles the contributions of others, the gift that moves us beyond our own self-hating into hating others. It is the gift of love. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not make itself rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always, this scripture says, protects, trusts, hopes, and perseveres. It never fails. It never wilts, or it never stops loving. And I speak not here about the feeling of love. I'm speaking about the actions that are love, because love is something that we do or choose not to do that shows the action opposite love. Surely at this Advent season, we see love in action, not talk. When Joseph broadly faces the circumstances and knows he must face the critics who want to ask him scandalous questions. When Mary likewise faces the critics because she knows the truth of who she is and the worth with which she stands before God. And when Joseph acts in faith and hope and in love to take his wife and son to Egypt in safety. Likewise, brothers and sisters, God calls us now to rely upon God's gifts of knowledge, yes, and faith and encouragement and hope, and in sincerity and in love, to strengthen and hold each other up, to build each other up, to look down upon no one, no group, no nation, and demand that no one look down upon us, but in mutual respect and sincere willingness to hold each other up in genuine loving actions to move forward an agenda that works to build all of us. That's the commitment we should leave this conference with. Amen.
Wow. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Usually, when we are in the confines of a worship setting, this is a moment that we move into a space called the invitation to Christian discipleship. In other words, you have heard the word, you've heard God's truth. The question, what are you going to do with it? And certainly from what we've heard today, it gives us exactly what we need to know if we are going to do the work of this united universal dialogue. It is indeed a work of love, faith, and hope. Thank you, Bishop Reddick, and to all of you, we say thank you. We hope that you received and you are going to process, and not only that, but that you will effectively respond. And as you said, this love is not just verbal, but one that is of action. Thank you. Thank you so much. As we move on now, we are again blessed this morning. As I was thinking about today's activities, I said to myself, look at God in operation. Do you know that today, before this day ends, we would have had all in one place at the same time the senior bishop of the CME Church, the senior bishop of the AME Church, and the senior bishop of the AME Zion Church through Bishop Kenneth Monroe. Only God could have orchestrated that, to have all of these senior bishops here today at the same time, because they all have tremendous work on the continent. And that's one of the reasons why we had them to come to share, because of the work that they have both on the continent as well as here in the States and other parts wherever Black people are. But at this time, it gives me a great delight to present to us two very distinct individuals. Let me first present Bishop Adam Jefferson Richardson Jr., who is going to respond to the principal presenter this morning. Here is another senior bishop who was elected and consecrated the 115th bishop in the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1996 at Louisville, Kentucky. He was assigned to the 14th Episcopal District, which includes 6 countries in West Africa from the years 2000 to 2004. Again, Bishop Richardson, if we had the time to go through all of what he has done, you will note that he has been honored by the people in Florida. You will note that he's an author. You will note that he is a tremendous pulpiteer. You will note that he is a fantastic pastor who is in the life transformative business. You will note that he is genuinely a people's person, kind-hearted, generous, gracious. He is a wonderful human being, a child of God. And we are so delighted that he has committed to coming and sharing with us on today. Today, he's going to respond to another very outstanding individual who will present to us, Dr. Jonathan Weaver. Dr. Jonathan Weaver is a pastor of the Mount Nebo Church in Maryland. He is one that you will never ever know upon encountering him that he has been involved in the work on the continent so many, many years. He reminded me of a time when he took a group of young people to Africa, Crossroads, Africa. And believe it or not, the AME Zion Church was one of those recipients of his travel at that time. And since meeting him, you will never ever know that Dr. Weaver is so well connected, both here on the continent, in America, as well as on the continent. When we put together this idea of 400 years celebration, he was our ambassador, so to speak, to the continent, because he would go and meet with so many heads of states, and in his encounters, he would share with them about the 400 years celebration. I'm not sure how and in what context, but I know that the people of Ghana took serious advantage of the 400 years, and there are many more ideas that have come out of it, and we'll be talking more about that. But Dr. Weaver is an outstanding pastor. You will never ever know that he took a congregation from 300 members to some 1,600 members. You will never know that he pastored a church with over 50 plus various ministries. You will never know that he took that congregation and purchased some 87 acres of land. You will never know that they have a school. You will never know that this brother is serious about the business of Christian discipleship. On yesterday, we're blessed to hear one of his proteges who shared with us. And that is something we all need to be mindful of. I tell people sometimes that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to the business of mentorship. We talk about the icon, John Lewis, who passed away the other day. Many of the great civil rights leaders who are passing off the stage. The question is, who are they leaving in their respective places? Who? But I know that in the case of our brother, he is in the business of discipling, training, that when he's off the stage, there will be those who will continue on in the work. So I'm so delighted to publicly thank him for his contributions in helping us to get this dialogue together, for all of those he recommended. And now let me present to all of us His Excellency, the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Weaver, a Marylander and a world citizen for the Kingdom and Pan-African Collective, of which he is the founder and president. Dr. Weaver, welcome.
Bishop, thank you so much. God bless you. I am so delighted to be with everybody today as a part of this innovative, historic conversation. And I want to first of all acknowledge Bishop Seth Lartey because of his leadership and his vision for this conference and quite frankly, beyond. I was blessed to have met him several years ago when he attended a conference being organized by Bishop Harry L. Seawright there in the 9th Episcopal District of the AME Church. And when Bishop Lartey got up to speak, I must say that, as I said to my wife several times, I felt like dancing on top of the table simply because of his passion for collectivity, bringing Black people together and specifically around economic empowerment, but also as he addressed the whole issue of us coming together as a Black people, whether or not we were African immigrants here in the United States or Black and African by ancestry and with the people of Africa, as well as Black people in other parts of the world. So again, Bishop, I want to say thank you, and I congratulate you for the tremendous 3-day session that we've had, and looking forward to what's going to take place beyond. I also want to thank Bishop Reddick. My goodness, Bishop Reddick, thank you so much for that extraordinary word that you provided for us. It is certainly one that hopefully everybody will take and walk with it. And then I want to thank God for my previous bishop for the 2nd Episcopal District, Bishop Adam J. Jefferson Richardson Jr. God bless you, Bishop. So good to have you as a part of this today. I want everybody to know that Bishop Richardson left an indelible mark upon my life, and especially on one year when he was with us as our Episcopal leader, that for our Founders Day, he launched, and we had as a general theme, celebrating the A in AME, so that our time was spent really looking at how we could become more aware of our connections with the people of Africa. And he did so in such a way where we also incorporated the ambassador from the Republic of Benin in West Africa to come and to address the body. And so Bishop Richardson, let me just say again, I thank you so much for what you have placed inside of me and the leadership that you have provided even before you became the senior bishop. And I'm grateful for you. Bishop Monroe, thank you also for your presence today and what you have done within the context of this work. Let me just take a few moments to share with everybody also that I want to thank Dr. McFadden. She has done a tremendous job in organizing and pulling all of us together, working for Bishop Lartey. And so Dr. McFadden, thank you and all of the other persons that have helped make this possible. I'm delighted to be able just to share some personal experiences that have brought me to the point where I can also share the need for all of us within the Black world, whether or not we are living on the continent of Africa, and I suspect that we have some that are joining us today. I've reached out to people in places like Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Malawi, and in South Africa and Namibia. But I want to begin by saying that there in the Old Testament, the 133rd Psalm, verse 1, says to us how good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. And so I know that Bishop Lartey has as the goal, the vision for us to do just that we would do some practical things. Again, Bishop Reddick, thank you for sharing with us the need for us to go beyond simply hearing, but indeed that we are to be doers of the word. And I'd like to share a few other things about that in just a moment. But out of that Psalm 133, it really spelled within me something to do 49 years ago, slightly less than a half a century, while I was a junior at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. And there on one occasion, there was a group of the Black students They were there huddled around a photo album. And I had just come from a class and I decided to walk over to where they were. And sure enough, it was an album containing pictures of one of the students' experiences in Africa the previous summer. And it turns out that her name, Dr. Quita Drain, actually, she was not a doctor at the time, but she subsequently became a doctor within the Veterans Administration. And she had spent the summer participating in a program called Operation Crossroads Africa. And by the way, I certainly would want to encourage particularly our young people to consider this program. And I spent the summer in 1971 in Nigeria working on building a health clinic along with 7 other university students from around the United States. That organization, Operation Crossroads Africa, was established by a Black Presbyterian pastor in Harlem named Church of the Master. And Dr. James Robinson had spent his earlier years in the early 1950s traveling in and out of Africa. And he was so inspired by what he saw about the emerging nations and those that were yet to be independent, but moving in that direction. And he wanted to find a way to provide an avenue for young people here in America that they might be able to go and to become sensitive to these emerging nations. Well, I went in 1971, 13 years after Crossroads Africa sent their first group of young people to Ghana, as a matter of fact. And there are 2 things that Dr. Robinson said that have stayed with me. First of all, he said that the darkest thing about Africa is America's ignorance of it. And how sad that is that here we are in the year of 2020. And in fact, we still have that sentiment that is true even today. We saw that even among some of the leaders within this current administration having that kind of mindset. But it has not been limited, unfortunately, by people within governmental circles. The second thing that he said was that while you may leave Africa, as he was referencing those of us that were going to serve as volunteers, he said, Africa will never leave you. And that has been true for me. And so for the last 49 years, I have been working with or working in Africa. I've now covered 40 different nations, and I've been blessed by those experiences. And I want to say to all of us that are gathered here today that I hope and pray that you will be inspired to do something in a very tangible way. And I'd like to be able to share with you some ways in which I think you can do it. We certainly can do it by encouraging even now young people, for those of us that are pastors or those of us that are in some organization or within our neighborhood or within our own family, to encourage some of our young people to in fact participate in this extraordinary program called Crossroads Africa. Google it and you will see where it's possible. Now, of course, with the current pandemic, they're not going to be having programs in all likelihood for this summer, but indeed at some time in the future when God makes it available, there will be young people that will be a beneficiary of this extraordinary program. Over the years, 11,000 young people, most of whom are in colleges and universities, have indeed participated in this program. And so therefore, I would encourage us to consider having our young people to participate in that kind of program. Serving through Crossroads Africa sooner led me to, as I experienced and called to be within the ministry, within the AME context, that I subsequently became the executive director for the Service and Development Agency, the developmental agency for the AME Church, and where, in fact, Bishop Reddick, I spent time there in Haiti, helping with a child survival project, and also galvanizing support through the AME Church, and also having pastors and members of our churches to visit with me to be able to support schools that are owned and operated by the AME Church there in Haiti. Subsequent to that, within my own church, we decided to engage in mission trips. And ultimately, starting in 2012, we have now broadened our perspective so that we not only have members of our own church, but others within the framework of the AME Church and even outside of the AME Church. We've had brothers and sisters within the Baptist Church and independent Black churches. And we've even had one brother who is of the Muslim faith that has joined us on these trips. And specifically, we've gone to places like Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also to Malawi. How we ended up doing this in terms of framing it within the context of medical missions happened to be hearing from our brothers and sisters in those countries and seeking to receive support that may be able to help them. Lo and behold, one of the members of our church, Dr. Raymond Nelson, has been a cardiologist for over 35 years. And he heard the call that I made from the pulpit on one Sunday morning, encouraging people from Greater Mount Nebo to participate in this first medical mission trip back in 2012. He responded to the call. And I must tell you that at the end of that 2-week assignment, where we were there in Rwanda and Congo, before we got to the airport, Dr. Nelson turned to me and said, "Pastor, do you know how it is that I ended up coming on this trip?" And I said, "No." He responded by telling me that, well, after you had made the appeal from the pulpit, for my birthday, my wife gave me an airplane ticket to go to Rwanda. And he said, before then, I hadn't thought about going to Africa, had not even considered going to Africa, but because of you and then my wife buying the ticket, I'm here. And he said, now I have a question for you, and that is, when are we coming back? And we have now been back to Rwanda and Congo. We added even Malawi, but we've done this now for 10 years, 2 weeks each year. We have now provided medical care for over 22,000 people. 95% of them had never seen a doctor before. And so that leads me to say, after hearing Bishop Reddick again and hearing Bishop Lartey, that we really do need to be about action, that we about doers of the word. I want to encourage anyone that may be interested in even being a part of the medical missions projects that we've had to please feel free doing so. We've even had 2 medical missions trips to Haiti. But I think to broaden this, I hope that within our various denominations, whether or not it's the AME Zion Church, the AME Church, the CME Church, the Baptist tradition, yes, even our Muslim brothers and sisters, that we will think about as leaders, encouraging and developing missions trips. What a difference it will make in the lives, not only of our brothers and sisters in Africa or in places like Haiti, but it will have a profound impact on our brothers and sisters here in America. And it just might spark them to want to also get others to be a part of this effort. I would submit to you that while many African nations, perhaps all of them, have an ambassador accredited to the United States of America, we're in a position to become ambassadors on their behalf as well by virtue of what we've seen. Let me also share some other ways in which we can connect with our brothers and sisters, even before we take a trip to Africa, literally to Africa. Most of us live in areas where there is a concentration of Black people. I'm talking about, yes, people like ourselves, African Americans, but I'm also talking about African immigrants to the United States. But I would submit to you that in too many places, on too many occasions, we are separated from one another. And I would invite us as African Americans to reach out to our brothers and sisters that live, in some cases, even in our own neighborhoods, but yet we don't connect with them. There are African churches here in the Washington metropolitan area, and I suspect that there are the same African churches in other cities around the country, but too often we are separated from one another. I want to encourage us to make it a point of reaching out to our brothers and sisters. We've done that with churches here in the DC area of Congolese and also of Nigerians, where we have maintained these kinds of relationships. And so I hope and pray that we will consider to do that. I would also say that within the embassy community, we have, as I said, African embassies positioned here in the Washington metropolitan area. But quite frankly, some of the ambassadors for those countries would be more than happy to come and to spend 2 to 3 days visiting the cities where you are, and then for you to invite them to come in and worship with you on a Sunday morning. I would dare say that if you give them an opportunity to come and then to talk about, in fact, what their needs are, their hopes, their dreams, it may very well be people within your congregation that get sparked by what they hear from that ambassador, to be able to then come up to that ambassador after the service is over and to say, Madam Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, I have a background in agriculture. I have a background in engineering. I have a background that may support what you're doing. And I'd love to be able to come to your nation. And it may very well be that begins the process of your own local church connecting with African nations. We've talked about these needs for partnerships. And let me just add, therefore, that over the last 20 years, through this organization that I founded, again through the inspiration of Dr. James Robinson, based upon that first trip I took 49 years ago, so that we now have something called the Pan-African Collective, where we meet monthly in order to bring people together from universities, from indeed corporations, as well as persons from other faith groups and from other churches, so that we can share information about Africa and to create connections and partnerships. And we have Zoom meetings on the third Saturday of each month. I would encourage our listeners and those that are watching us to join us by simply going to panafricancollective.org, and you'll be able to learn more about what we're doing. That's why I was so excited to be a part of this universal dialogue started by Bishop Seth Lartey. And I want him to know, like my friend Mel Foote, that I am here for the long haul, and I want to be able to do everything I can. That is why also I shared with Bishop Lartey that I'm now a member of the board of directors of Mercy Ships, this organization that has been involved in providing surgical procedures from a floating hospital on the west coast of Africa and the east coast of Africa for 40 years. And they have just now completed their 100,000th surgical procedure last year in Guinea when I was on the ship along with the other members of the board of directors. I hope and pray that we will recognize that we've got people within our congregations, within organizations such as sororities and fraternities, the Divine Nine, in the NAACP, within the Urban League, organizations within our communities that are gifted in so many ways. We have Black doctors, we have nurses, we have so many people that could indeed find that they can be a blessing to the people of Africa. I can share with you right now, I believe that we have people such as the president of the Council of Protestant Churches. They're in the Republic of the Democratic Republic of Congo. That organization alone is the largest Protestant council in the world. And he has written to me, sharing with me his desire to have Black people in America to come and to be able to provide assistance in terms of the clinics and the hospitals that are owned by that Protestant council. And likewise, for secondary schools and colleges and universities that are owned by that council. And so this is also an appeal for us to be able to do that. Likewise, they're in Angola, the Council of Churches of Angola, led by a woman. has put out the appeal so that we can provide support here in the United States for them. Case in point, she has asked me whether or not we could identify people that could assist helping to make sure that people in Angola are emotionally and mentally healthy. And I was able to obtain several Black psychologists that have been able to engage in Zoom gatherings for the people of Angola, members of the churches there. And it's been very, very successful. And so we're going to continue in doing that. And I would say to all of us today, as I'd like to just close by saying that there in the Old Testament, Zechariah says, in effect, do not despise small beginnings. And in fact, I would also say that even though now this has been a 3-day conference that has brought together people from around the world, and it may seem like it's a relatively small number of people, I would submit to you that we ought not despise this small beginning, because we can then transition from the Old Testament into the New Testament. And here we are during this Advent season, preparing to celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, which took place over 2,000 years ago. But I would also like to add to that, that while he was here with that earthly ministry for 33 years, before he left this earth, he turned to his disciples, he turned to his followers and said, greater things shall you do. Now, most of us know that we would be surprised and maybe ready to scratch our heads and to say greater things than Jesus did, healing the sick, raising the dead. His point was that he was soon going to be leaving this earth. And so therefore, there were going to be people that he would never encounter physically, that there were going to be places that he never would have been able to go. And here we are now, 2,000 years later, brought together through this dialogue. And I do believe that what God is calling us to do is to make sure that as Black people, to recognize that there are greater things that we are being called to do. We're called to be greater in terms of having people within the Black business community to be able to impart their skills and to partner with businesses on the continent of Africa so that they will no longer be raped, if you will, on the continent of Africa. They will no longer be exploited, but rather that we will have brothers and sisters that own businesses or that are part of a business here in America that can take their skills and their talents and to be able to help to transform African economies. That we will take the skills that we've got as doctors and as nurses and as engineers, and to be able to take our skills and to do greater things so that ultimately those of us within the Black community, whether we are African immigrants here in the United States, whether or not we know it was our ancestors that came from Africa, or whether or not it's the people of Africa, that we will recognize that we are indeed one people and that we need to become united. And as we become united, greater things we shall be able to do as a united people. So I encourage you, Bishop Seth Lartey, Bishop Reddick, Bishop Richardson, and others that will be a part of this movement, that we will recognize that while this has been a moment these last 3 days, that God is catapulting us into making sure that this is a movement. And I would submit to each and every one of us, it means therefore that God is calling us to do greater. God bless you.
Let me begin by expressing appreciation to Dr. Weaver for his exceptional presentation here today. And being tapped to offer this response actually gives me an opportunity to salute Bishop Seth Lartey for his vision and passion in bringing this much needed conference with its Pan-Africanist flavor and intent. This has been tremendous. I've been pleased to honor the work of Dr. McFadden and the role that she has played in organizing this amazing 3-day event. I've been informed, enlightened, and inspired by the richness of our coming together for this purpose. I want to thank also Bishop Reddick for his amazing presentation here today. As always, he's a blessing to the body of Christ, and I've been blessed. This moment also provides me with another opportunity to express my gratitude to the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Weaver, who is extraordinary in his knowledge about the Pan-Africanist movement and is doubly committed to an active engagement in ministry at the deep end of what ministry means for both indigenous persons and the goodwill of the whole for those of us here in the United States or in the diaspora. His relationship to the collective banking organization, as well as now the Pan-Africanist Collective. I was his bishop, as he said, for 8 years, and I know the pragmatism of his work and of his worldview. As he indicated, he chaired a district-wide event under the theme emphasizing the A in AME. I believe emphasizing the A is what this conference is about, dealing with United Universal Dialogue. I served as a bishop in Africa for 8 years, first in West Africa, then 4 years in the Republic of South Africa, headquartered in Johannesburg. 30 years ago, however, I stepped on the continent of Africa for the first time. The flight landed in Nigeria, but after a brief period on the ground, we proceeded to Ghana. I stepped off the plane in Accra and endeavored to kiss the ground. I felt at home. Here in the United States, I had begun to self-identify as African American. And I put that on my immigration form for the customs agent. That, along with my passport, I handed it to the agent, who looked at me and then looked at my documents. And the agent proceeded to run a line through my African designation and my preferred identity. Presumably, my intent to identify with him was not reciprocated. He was African. I was American. Undeterred, I can tell you I love Africa and its people. I was always annoyed, however, especially in West Africa, by what I saw as abject poverty in so many places. The people were standing destitute, literally on top of wealth. In South Africa, the issue was the legacy of brutal apartheid. When I returned to Africa as a bishop, I was determined to do something meaningful, especially as related to the economic matters associated with the areas that I would be serving. The industries, however, were importing people from the US and from Europe to work the top tier management positions, as the land had already been locked into 100-year leases to those companies. Millions of acres of land filled with pineapples in Cote d'Ivoire, in a place called Dole, or millions of acres of rubber trees in a community in Liberia known as Firestone, or major plants in Ghana with signage that read Nestle's. In that drained resources and exported those goods and products to markets outside and away from the places where they were grown. In Liberia, for example, lumberjacks were brought in to cut down entire forests, hauling away the timber Money from the timber was used to help finance civil war and to prop up failed government. I left a hotel one morning many years ago in a certain country en route to the airport. And upon seeing the colorful banner stretched across the road and making conversation with the taxi driver, I remarked, I see that you're celebrating Independence Day this weekend. How many years will it be? And the driver said, we'll observe 24 years tomorrow. I said, congratulations, that's great. His retort stunned me. In the 24 years since we declared independence, we haven't built one road. We haven't even filled one pothole, not a new traffic light or a stop sign. We haven't added one more classroom, not one more hospital bed. We've been stagnant for 24 years. 24 years of independence, 24 years of stagnation. In Monrovia, as the AME bishop, I traveled the road to get to churches and schools. And on a particular road, the potholes were so deep, we bounced our heads to the top of the ceiling in the car. So I asked the question to no one in particular in the car, when was the last time this road has had any attention? And in unison, they announced the specific day in August 1990. For a week, I presided over an annual conference. I lived in a city to which the war had not been kind at all. No telephone service, no electricity, no running water, no plumbing. And I'm not sure that Buchanan has recovered since the war. So what is it? Is it despotic leadership, tendencies, incompetence, self-ambition, war? What is it? Here's what I do know. We have an opportunity to make a difference beginning now. I've often thought of the awesomeness of Africa, not just its size, but the size of its potential. What of the United States of Africa, a continent of people whose humanity is respected? We've heard the challenge today from Dr. Weaver. Powerful presentation with concrete things that we can actually do. And following the mandate from our preacher today, Bishop Reddick, love in action, because love is a verb. So we are called actually to do greater things, not only in our own communities where we live, but also in the land that we love. Let's get busy.
Thank you so much to Bishop Richardson. Thank you so much to Dr. Weaver and Bishop Reddick for those powerful words this morning, for charging us and challenging us of what it is that we can do. And that's one of the things that I have admired about all of our speakers this week. And that is, not only did they come with acknowledging the issues that we needed to deal with, but they also came with some resolutions, some strategic planning of how we get that done. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our panel discussion. But let me just say to all of you, thank you so much for the wealth of information, knowledge, and passion that you bring to this dialogue because of your experience. And so we are forever grateful for you partnering with us, for you not thinking it robbery to join us these last few days to help make a difference. I loved some of the things that Dr. Weaver talked about, and we'll again talk about it during the panel discussion. Because we've seen over the last 3 days, there is something that we can do, and there is no excuse And as Bishop Reddick said, love in action. We need to begin to, as we often like to say here in America, put our money where our mouth is. And so we are grateful for all that you have done. We are going to take a little break, and we are going to share with you a couple of videos. And then when we come back, we're going to have our panel discussion and then our responses to the panel discussion and to the day. And so again, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, please put your comments in the chat. If you have any questions, we will get to those questions. Start a watch party, invite somebody to come and to join us in this important dialogue, this important conversation. And as you can see from the presentations and the comments, it's not just a dialogue. We are calling ourselves to action. So enjoy about a 10-minute break, come back, ready to engage our panelists and our presenters in an enriching dialogue.
This is a drill. This is a drill.
L'école, les pieds faisaient mal, donc ça m'empêchait. Il fallait toujours que j'emprunte la moto pour arriver à l'école. Comme puiser de l'eau, je ne pouvais pas. Même à l'eau change, je ne pouvais pas. Donc j'étais obligée de rester.
Bon, ce qui m'a trop fait mal, c'est parce que partout où Julienne passait, on la regardait toujours mal. Il y a même des gens qui avançaient des mots. Une femme enceinte, elle peut vite se cacher de façon que son enfant ne doit pas ressembler à Julienne. Bon, j'avais ce qui me donnait souvent la force, c'est par rapport à elle-même. Dans ma tête, quand j'ai d'abord vu qu'on a d'abord, même si je ne suis pas d'abord appelée Julienne, je pouvais d'abord sauter de joie, mourir de joie. Je n'avais même pas eu même un peu de soucis quelque part. Mais je sais déjà qu'ici, là, elle peut déjà s'en sortir dans sa vie sans problème.
Maintenant, c'est que je peux y aller marcher avec mes amis. Peut-être que si on va aller se balader, je n'aurais plus besoin de l'aide qu'attendait un peu, je m'assois pour me reposer. Je peux y aller marcher comme je veux. Et c'est très fier. C'est pour ça que je remercie Dieu et merci Chip et tout le monde qui m'a regardé là-bas tout au long de mon séjour.
Almost 40 years ago, I took my first trip from Lausanne, Switzerland by train to Italy to look at ships. I listed some of the things that I didn't know or that I'd heard. Things like You can't do that. It's way too expensive. I didn't know where we would find a crew. In fact, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was 32. That's awfully young. Almost 40 years ago, God took a huge risk. I could say that it all started with a hurricane or reading a book about the famous SS Hope. I could say it started with meeting Mother Teresa or with the birth of our special needs son, John Paul. Or I could say it began with my parents' simple way with grace and mercy and dignity with their small town helping hands. I could say all of those things about the very beginning of the idea that became Mercy Ships, and they'd all be true.
Mercy Ships is a unique organization because it is bringing services to countries that would otherwise never be able to access those services.
The millions of people who either physically or financially do not have access to healthcare are staggering.
We just see people that need help. You realize that they have no way of getting help. And I want them to know that they're loved.
After the rejection and the ridicule and the hard lives that they've had up until this point, then to have a ward full of nurses and the other ship staff, people just pour out so much love on them. Love does make a difference.
People say to me, well, there's all these millions. How do you think you can change that? And we can change the individuals one life at a time.
The ART platform, surgeons, nurses, professionals from all over the world, offering this free of charge at the highest standards is unique.
If you talk to any of the government leaders, as I have, they will tell you how beneficial Mercy Ships has been, not only for their people, but also in terms of a lasting impact.
We're working hard here to leave a legacy of improved healthcare.
Mercy Ships is particularly good at providing not just training, but training with an imbued sense of needing to pass on the training.
We can work together and do things together that we can never do by ourselves.
More than 400 years ago, Africans were brought to this country and enslaved. And for 401 years, we've struggled for health equity and equality, for wealth equity, to be treated as human beings and not second-class citizens. It was a travesty what happened, but the 400 Years Celebration Organization helps to create awareness, educate. The purpose was to gather people from all walks of life, entertainment, politics, athletics, education, to celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans since being in this country. We know that we have a long way to go, and the United Universal Dialogue was the beginning of having conversations of Africa and African Americans and Africans worldwide. We want you to be a part of the movement. My name is Kathy Thomas McFadden, and I serve as the Executive Director of the 400 Years Celebration Incorporated. And under the leadership, guidance, and vision of our leader, CEO, and founder, Bishop Seth Olarte, we want to invite you to partner with us as we create change, as we celebrate, as we create a 100-year strategic plan to strengthen the infrastructure of Africa, to bridge the gap between the continent and the diaspora, to begin to create awareness for all peoples that they might understand the rich wealth and heritage of the African people and their descendants. So join us, visit us at www.400yearscelebration and partner with us financially. Partner with us as we begin to create a movement to move forward. And we ask that you would join us as we join others who are already doing the work. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed your little break, and I hope that you enjoyed the videos that were shared with you. We want to invite you to partner with us through the 400 Years Celebration Organization. We want you to partner with us as we partner with Mercy Ship. And so you may give at Cash App 400 Years Celebration. You may mail in your contributions to 808 South Lawrence Street, Montgomery, Alabama 36104. Make sure that you do it to the attention of 400 Years. And let us know if you're contributing to the organization or contributing to Mercy Ship, because not only are we partnering with Mercy Ship, but we're also looking forward to creating more avenues where we can dialogue and get together and do what we feel like we're being called to do. And all of that takes funds, all of that takes money. And so again, we're glad that you're here with us today. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, we ask that you would start a watch party. We ask that you would invite your friends and be sure to, especially during this dialogue, to put your questions in the chat. And so we're going to invite all of our panelists, including Dr. Weaver and Bishop Lartey, to join us as we begin with our panel discussion. And so let me begin by introducing some very profound young people who are with us. Paul Presidu is an accomplished individual in Westchester County, New York. He currently serves as the Young Professional Chairman for the United Nations Association of Westchester and on the National Committee of Young Professionals for the United Nations Association of the United States of America. He currently resides in the city of New Rochelle, New York, and is the son of two immigrants. His mother is an Afro-Colombian and father is Haitian. Paul's background is in climate activism, as he currently works for the Federated Conservationists of Westchester County as their student and youth network coordinator. His many years of activism has resulted in him receiving numerous accolades, including being named the top 22 under 30 young professional wonderkind by Westchester Magazine and a top 40 under 40 Latino rising star by the Hispanic Coalition of New York Incorporated. Wow, how powerful. Now, I practice some of these names and sometimes they may not come out correctly, but we're going to also invite Dr. John M. Ulim-Wengu to join us as well. He is a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Dr. Ulim-Wengu holds a PhD in agricultural economics and master in economics from Ohio State University and a master in development economics from Williams College. His research interests include poverty dynamics, agricultural productivity, and rural development. Since 2007, he has been involved in strategic research on the transformation of agricultural sector in Africa under the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program agenda. He is currently the Africa-wide coordinator of the Regional Strategic Analysis and Knowledge Support System. He is also a very busy person with us. Next, we want to bring on Mr. Eugene Faison, who is the principal chair of DGrid Energy, LLC. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Premier Cold Chain Solutions, provider and maker of solar cold chain products designed and manufactured to solve post-harvest loss challenges in agriculture, dairy, fisheries, and any temperature-sensitive product sector. DeGrid is a social enterprise with metrics to impact beneficiaries' lives through food security and improved nutrition, currently distributed in Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Zambia for food security. And we apologize, but that our last presenter, Mr. Jonathan Nwu, who is also a part of the UN Young Professionals program. We want to thank Dr. Brenda Smith from the AME Zion Church for giving us those connections. And so we're going to bring all of our panelists on, and I'm sure they're going to correct me about how to say their names, along with Bishop Lartey and Dr. Weaver. We're going to go ahead and bring them on as we begin our panel discussion. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone. Now I'm going to ask Dr. John to say his last name for us so that we won't butcher it the rest of the day. Welcome.
Thank you, Kari. My name is Ulimwengu, which is in Swahili, by the way, and means universe.
Very good, very good. We're going to ask Dr. Weaver if he would come on, and all of our panelists to come on so that we can begin our conversation. We want to thank you all so much for being a part of this, for just taking the time out of your schedule to share with us your expertise, to share with us your experiences. Mr. Technician, I do believe that we're missing one. If you would go ahead and bring them on. And we'll go ahead and get started. Each of you has been given the opportunity to share for 3 to 4 minutes. Our panelists and Dr. Weaver and Bishop Lartey will be sort of our consultants doing this, but engaging to share 3 to 4 minutes of what you want to share on the topic for today. And so let us begin with Mr. Eugene Faison.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us to attend this, and DeGrid Energy is very pleased to be here. I've been working in Africa since 1970. It goes back to early times in Senegal and the Congo, which was then called Zaire. And we have really been interested in 2 issues, basically, that we've identified that we think we can do something about. And it started when we were in Senegal and Zaire, and that was the issue of limited or no electricity. And without electricity, you can't do very much, and particularly in the areas that are pertinent to health, areas that are pertinent to food security, and areas that are pertinent to the economy itself. So what we have done is designed, built, and manufacture a solar-powered walk-in refrigeration system that is modular, expandable, and is utilized, as you stated, utilized for post-harvest loss, for medicines, for fisheries, for dairy, and for any requirements that are required, require management of temperatures. This seems to be particularly important now when you think about the COVID-19 situation. In recent conversations with some donors, we've been exploring how to deliver the vaccines that are now being available for in Africa. And the challenge there is that the infrastructure does not allow for the delivery of the Pfizer vaccines because of the strict temperature requirements of minus 70 degrees. And the others that are becoming available, while their temperature requirements are less stringent, there just is not the cold chain in the country that is allowing it to be able to allow everyone to be vaccinated. So our focus around infrastructure in Africa is, number one, around solar power, and number two, around cold storage and building out the cold chain for every sector that requires temperature sensitive management. And I look forward to discussing that in the Q&A to see if there are ways that we can address that or attract others to participate with us in reference to that. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, sir. Let us now move to Paul President.
Thank you, Dr. McFadden. Can everyone hear me well?
We hear you loud and clear.
That my connection was okay. First of all, I want to thank you and Bishop Olarte for giving me this opportunity to address you, and also Dr. Brenda Smith, who is Partnerships Chair for the United Nations Association of Westchester County, and she's also a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. When she informed me about this event, I knew I had to be part of this because of the gravity of how important this conversation is in light of the rising civil unrest that we're seeing, not only in the United States of America, but also throughout the world. So in a little bit of information, my work with the United Nations Association has been both hyperlocal and also has been supporting our global dialogue. And I think that the streamlining the resources and the overall membership of the United Nations Association is very vital for the enhancement of Africa's infrastructure for future development. Just to give you guys a little bit of background information, the United Nations Association, better known as the World Federation of United Nations Association, was founded in 1946. It was established to empower everyday citizens with a platform to promote the values of the United Nations and defend multilateralism, which is the alliance of multiple countries pursuing the same goal. Earlier, when I was listening to Bishop Richardson discuss the damages of apartheid in South Africa, I recalled doing a little bit of research yesterday and finding out that the World Federation of United Nations Associations delivering a resolution to the United Nations General Assembly in 1977 calling on the UN Security Council to take immediate steps to ensure that no state, multinational, or person is allowed to provide support to South Africa, especially in their pursuit of nuclear technology. I think if South Africa had nuclear technology during apartheid, it would have been very difficult for us to have them change their ways. As of right now, within the World Federation of United Nations Associations, there are 100 national associations, with 25 of them, or 1/4, being of African descent. And the United Nations Association, which I'm going to just call as UNA, just to keep things short, I know I have a time limit here, it provides free membership to anyone up until age 26. And I think this is very important for us to promote because it's going to allow us to empower our youth, no matter what their socioeconomic standing in society, with a platform to receive global awareness, develop their skills, and also, most importantly, to develop into the future diplomats that our nation needs and also African nations need. And I believe that this could be more thoroughly promoted within the continent of Africa, considering that there are 54 independent nations in Africa, but we only have 25 active United Nations associations. Through the UNA, communities will receive a global infrastructure in a civil society that directly connects individuals to the United Nations for addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is something that I believe is very important because, as probably you all may know, sometimes when they're resolving these issues, the Sustainable Development Goal, which is accessing clean air, quality education, women's rights, healthcare, they tend to be political, even though there are things that are supposed to be bigger than politics. These are things that are essential for our everyday life. So organizations such as the United Nations Association could empower everyday citizens to kind of be on a more level playing field, negotiating with the policymakers, with negotiating with their government leaders on the needs that need to be established within their community. So going back to the youth conversation of the United Nations Association, the World Federation has a youth advisory council with 2 of the 9 representatives being from Africa. One is Mr. Rian van der Merwe of South Africa and Sekil Ngendawawu of Zimbabwe. And as I mentioned before, only 25 of the 54. So we need to really get that out there and really empower our youth with the resources of UNA so they can start implementing projects within the local community by tapping into the global infrastructure that is UNA. Also, all of us here in America that are of African descent should really make sure that we become partners of the United Nations Association, become members, so that we can encourage our youth and also help streamlining resources to other nations. So most recently in February 3rd, I received a letter from Tihani Mohammed Bande of Nigeria, who is the president of the United Nations 74th General Assembly, and Mana Jewel of Norway, who is the 75th president of the UN Economic and Social Council, and informed me of my selection to represent America on the UN General Assembly's Youth Plenary and the 9th session of the Economic and Social Council's Youth Forum. And even though this conference was postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic and safety concerns, it still exposed me to a lot of long-standing issues that we have in Africa and also all throughout the world that we need to address the empowerment of our people. It's very difficult when people are lacking access to the everyday needs to be, dignified humans, for us to talk to them about the empowerment within breakthroughs of technology or the empowerment of accessing quality education. So it's really making sure that we have that multilinear approach of providing people with the holistic resources of what it means to become a future leader by helping cultivate other leaders within our communities all across the world. So I'm really, really happy to be part of this panel discussion. I think I'm closing in on my 4-minute mark right now. I have my watch in the corner, and I'm really, really proud of this conversation that you're having and the professionals that I've been hearing all throughout. This is day number 3, all throughout this entire forum. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let us bring up Mr. Jonathan Nwaru. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's pronounced Waru.
Say that again.
It's pronounced Waru. Let's pretend
Okay.
that the N is silent.
Okay.
Dr. McFadden, Mr. Faison, Paul, all other distinguished members of this panel, thank you for having me. I, like Paul, am a part of United Nations Association, the Westchester chapter. And in this work, I have started to understand also, in particularly, my family is, in fact, Nigerian. So we originally started in Nigeria, and some of us emigrated here. But one of the recurring themes as I was going over and looking over my notes and reading up on a few things this morning is the fact in so many African nations, and I will use Nigeria as an example because that's the one I'm the most intimately familiar with, is that we don't do a decent enough job in supporting our young people. Africa in general is going to have one of the largest, if not largest, population of young people on Earth by mid-century, if not already. Nigeria, which has the largest economy in Africa, has a youth unemployment rate of about 14.2%, which is shameful. Because there's a lot of talent and potential coming out of Africa and Nigeria, especially with this generation being the most talented and educated generation on the face of the planet. And so that's another thing we need to address. Another issue we also need to address that affects young people is healthcare, because what the recurring theme is in so many of these nations is that you have, in order for you to get decent healthcare, essentially, if you have means, you go overseas. If you don't, you use the local hospital and essentially you hope for the best. So if we want young people to play more of an active role, we have to invest in them. And a lot of the mechanisms that would be used to support them are often gobbled up because a lot of governments in throughout the continent of Africa have misplaced priorities. And by misplaced priorities, I mean issues of rampant corruption. And this has led to some of the social upheaval and a lot of the mass protests you've been seeing in Nigeria, and also as well around the world and in other nations. But in Nigeria, most recently, and what is a continuing situation, is the End SARS movement, which is a special unit that was set up to deal with armed robberies, which turned into a unit that engaged in extrajudicial killings, bribery, racketeering, all sorts of things that it wasn't obviously by design to use for. And so I noted to Paul in some of the conversations that we've had about this is that if you have young people out there protesting and demanding things that they should already have, that should be basic second nature, you are having a generation that is wasting their resources basically fighting for their lives when they shouldn't have to, when instead they can be in jobs and in positions where they are innovating, even mentoring other people to come up behind them, doing the things that is going to make our society a better place. And I'm sure as I'm closing in on my time, I just want to end with, I like the fact that we're having these conversations, especially via the UN, and giving all of us a platform to basically not only learn more about these issues, but learn about the ways that we can help and take an active role. Because this notion of, well, Africa is just a continent that's dependent on outside sources is just something I don't believe to be true. It's called, you need to just stop robbing yourself of the resources that you need, the things for yourself. And they're not looking for help from us, they're looking for partners. As someone once said, I've come here to help. Well, I don't need help. If you're here to help me, go home. Now, if you are here to be a partner, then we can work together.
Wow, thank you so very much. And we're going to get to some of the comments that you made that I find very intriguing. And it's the same sort of plight here in America with our young people. But we're going to ask Dr. Uluwengu to come and share with us, and then we'll get into our conversation. That was much better, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Congratulations. Thank you, Dr. McFadden. I'm really delighted to be here. And thank you for Dr. Weaver to extend the invitation to me. For the last 13 or 14 years, I spent my life advising African governments on agricultural development across the continent. As part of my institute, I lead the group of African researchers that are supporting the development of agriculture sector across the continent. Originally, I'm from the DRC Congo, but today I was asked to say something on the so-called Africa infrastructure paradox. It's not a secret that Africa is one of the lagging region in terms of infrastructure, roads, energy, waterways, railways. When you look at something like electricity, 69% of sub-Saharan Africans don't have access to electricity. That is 600 million people, almost twice the size of the US population, compared to 17% in South Asia and 2% in Latin America. And investment in infrastructure in Africa as a share of GDP, 3.5. To trigger the type of development that we need in Africa, that has to be around 4.5% of GDP, which means that between 2015 and 2025, African should have invested about $150 billion to upgrade infrastructure. This is, I mean, when you look at China, it's 7.7% investment in infrastructure as a share of GDP. In India is 5.2%. So we are below what I will call the benchmark, but it's yes, it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity. It means that the room for growth in Africa is just, it's out there. We need to. So why is it a paradox? Because the potential is there, the demand is there, and $150 billion over 10 years, that's nothing. But so why is it that we don't see that type of investment? There are a couple of reasons. First, the issue of debt. The African countries are struggling with debt, and so many governments are reluctant to add to that burden of debt. Second is the whole struggle between addressing short-term needs in terms of food, health, education, versus those long-term investment into infrastructure. When they are facing tight budget constraints, most of the time infrastructure investment is not on the top of the list. Third, there are the issues of feasibility studies for specific infrastructure projects. Africa as a whole doesn't yet have the capacity to develop, to design those, to produce those feasibility studies that investors can use. The next issue is the whole issue of guarantee funds. When you are dealing with struggling African struggling budget, providing guarantee fund, it's a problem. And China has found a way of, they are asking for natural resources as a guarantee to the investment, which is a very dangerous. Is when you look at Chinese investment across Africa, most of the natural resources in terms of oil, in terms of mining, at some point will belong to China because African country won't be able to repay the debt. Of course, the next issue is the issue of off-stake agreement. Yes, you can invest in infrastructure, but you need off-takers. Eugene mentioned I'm working with him on some of the comprehensive package where not only providing energy, but you bring agriculture development as an off-taker sector. You need to provide demand for infrastructure to make sure that the investment are viable. And the last one is the issue of governance, corruption, the quality of institutions. So that's what explains the so-called Africa's infrastructure paradox, where there is a demand, there is a potential. Money is not the issue, but still we don't yet see that increase in investment. But as I said, this is a room for growth, and we should take it that way. Thank you, Dr. McFadden.
Thank you so much. All of you have provided for us a wealth of information for us to begin to work with. And so I'm going to ask each one of you to unmute your mics so that we can begin this conversation. There was a lot said. I liked what Jonathan Waru talked about, and that was help versus partnerships. And to go back to what you said, Dr. John, in terms of feasibility studies, that's one of the things that we can invest in. And so we are here, and the continent is where it is. What can we on this side, as we begin to orchestrate and build our 100-year plan, what is it that we can do now? You talked about funds. This whole day is dedicated to the infrastructure. What can we do now? What organizations can we partner with in order to begin the work? It's not going to happen overnight. We know that. Several of you talked about short-term versus long-term. I think that by now with this conversation, you know that we're in it for the long haul. This is not just something we're doing to make ourselves feel good. What can we do? Anybody, what can we do? What do we need to do now?
I can start. I believe in the power of model house. We pilot a pilot project. Let's find one country and one, I don't know, maybe electricity or railway or waterway, whatever that project is. And let's use that as the model house, using the resources that are in this network, from feasibility study all the way to financing and management. And let's use that as a pilot, as a model house, just to show people out there that we have the capacity to do it. Sometimes for you to invite others for help, in this partnership, you need to go ahead and show what you bring to the table. And I think if we can do that in one country or several countries, we will be in a position to play that role of anchor for Africa and the rest of the world.
And I think that means, as you say, electricity or one model, one pilot, that's going to mean us coming to the table and prioritizing. We know that all of it is important. Health, adequate health is important. Funding is important. And so it's going to mean that as we begin to work on the 100-year strategic plan, to prioritize what we deal with first. And so that certainly is part of a strategic plan. Anybody else want to address that?
I also think that part of that another part of it that I didn't get to mention earlier when I first spoke is also, and it highlights back to investment and infrastructure, is also the lack of social mobility. It's also a lack of social mobility. That's a problem not only just in Africa, but here in the United States. And also gender equity as well, because a lot of times you will see, especially in the more rural areas of African nations, that the priority is put on making sure the sons have everything to succeed, and not so much the girls. And so that's another aspect that we need to consider: gender equity and gender parity, because again, if we're going to go and fully unlock the talent and potential of young people, everybody has to come up. Everyone has to be given the opportunity or have the opportunity to come up together. No one can be left behind. And the great equalizer is going to have to be, in terms of infrastructure, another part of that is it's going to have to be education. Also, in a world where we are becoming more and more technology focused, we need to also build up sustainable power grids, because the last time I visited Nigeria, which is over 10 years ago now, there were moments where we would lose electricity. And me being the American, I mean, I was accustomed to it because of my previous trips. That's just something that happened. But yeah, and everyone there reacted calmly. Here, if something like that were to happen, even for a few hours, we'd lose our damn minds. But the point that I'm making is that it is very, very difficult for you to study if you have all of these gadgets that you need that are now essential in school. It's very hard for you to study if the power is not sustainable and keeps going out. Another aspect that I think is also key is this notion that it's just like, in terms of it's more on the infrastructure challenge. It's not so much building up infrastructure, but also building up infrastructure that is good and reliable and will have the confidence of the people in this area to use. And so, for example, they finally built a railroad that connected one part of the country to the other. And many of my family members said quite openly, I'm not taking it because it's going to be unreliable. It's going to be shoddy. And I said to him, we have infrastructure problems here. We may be a first world nation, but we've got infrastructure problems here ourselves. So it's just like, how do we put our best minds together and discuss that? And I think one solution to that is also, back to education requirements, is also introducing people to the kinds of to develop the kinds of skill sets to go into professions that are going to benefit society largely. And I don't just mean being a doctor or being a lawyer. We also need engineers. We also need architects. We also need people that are good with technology. And I think the UN, through its Millennial Challenge goals, is indeed trying to address that. But on the local level, what is it? Because it reminds me of a phrase a professor used when I was in college. He said, we need to think globally and fight locally. And so how do we bring that mindset forward to harness and spur action that will be beneficial to us, not just here, but also over there as well? Because we may be on different sides of the Atlantic, but we still have very, very common problems.
And that's exactly true. You're exactly right. And there's several things that you said that I wanted to bring out. Mr. Mel Foote, who was on our panel on Thursday, brings up again the issue that, once again, not as an expertise, but I happen to be the only female in the room. And so it goes back to what you're saying about gender equity and gender parity, that we need to, it's not that we didn't invite people, perhaps it's we need to find the people who have the skill set, who have the experience, the knowledge, and the passion to want to do some of the work. It also goes back to mindset, and we've heard that Thursday and Friday, and we're hearing it again. It's a common theme, excuse me, and that is the mindset. You know, I wonder if young people really believe that they can become something other than a doctor and a lawyer, maybe an architect or engineer. Do they have access to the education, to programs? And so again, you all mentioned it today, and it's something that Dr. Weaver mentioned, and something that we really need to look into, and that is getting our young people into programs that already exist in order to expand their awareness and their knowledge, so that they realize that there is something more than just the community where they live, and that yes, there are people who are doing things, and that they too can do it. A lot of reasons times we don't do things is because we think that we can't do it, and we don't have mentors to encourage us to say, yes, you can. If an African American, a Black man can be president of the United States, you can do whatever it is that you want to. And so again, that's one of the things that we need to begin to focus on, gender equity, and focusing on our young people as we begin to create the strategic plan for this infrastructure.
Dr. McFadden?
Yes.
Do you mind if I raise a question with any one of the panelists?
Go right ahead.
In light of what Jonathan was saying a few moments ago about his experiences in parts of Africa, and I know that Dr. John alluded to it as well, just the plight of the difficulty of electricity, or the shortage of electricity. But there is no shortage, of course, of sunlight. And so I'm wondering, therefore, if Brother Eugene, you might want to just share a little bit more about the rationale behind using solar energy and that innovation, and what that can do to revolutionize particularly the agricultural sector and also fishing. So Eugene, would you mind responding to that?
No, Reverend Weaver, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think the solution that is going to be the solution is going to be renewables. And that is going to look like solar power, it's going to look like wind power, it's going to be what's being called hydrogen green. That's new, there's more technology coming that's going to be relevant. There won't be a traditional grid being built in Africa, particularly in the rural areas. The efficiencies that are being generated by solar specifically are, and what is growing from what is being called mini grids, is providing full communities with electricity that can be utilized not only for the individual, but also for the productive use of manufacturing or and other equipment that is necessary. I want to say that I think this organization, the churches, the membership, the collaboration, the integration of the different denominations is a key ingredient in looking at the possibility of opportunities for piloting like John discussed. Because there isn't one business person that I meet with in all the countries that I'm in that is not attending a church or is not rooted in spirit, and is looking for a way to connect. And I think that in our model, we look for local partners. Our local partners, it's amazing. They're engineers, they're mechanical engineers, they're electrical engineers, they're building solar operations locally. I mean, it's actually happening, and it is really a field of capable, intelligent, technically proficient people there that can be partnered with from Africa, with African Americans here, to really accomplish what I'm hearing the vision being stated here could happen. So power is essential. There can be no development without power and refrigeration, because Africans can grow food now, but they can't preserve it. So the issue of food security is critical, and when you look at the challenge that Africa is facing with how they're going to get this COVID vaccine to their countries, they need electricity, they need power, they have to have it, or there's so many people that will not be accessible to get the vaccine. So there's a lot of places to start, but I think that fixing on one place and building something out from that, and utilizing the masses of people who have interest here in the US with those that have interest in Africa, is a great platform that you are talking about. And I encourage you to look at how that strategic plan can be developed around one issue that we're trying to solve.
That's why we have you. So you'll be a part of that team to help us look at that. Dr. John, I see you. And then Paul, I see you.
Thank you, Dr. McFadden. I try to not to speak about agriculture, but I can't. I have to for many reasons. For one is that of more than 60% of available land across the world is in Africa. More than 60% of available land, arable land. That's one. Unfortunately, every year, Africans as a whole spend between $35 to $40 billion on food import, which doesn't make any sense. 80% of processed food consumed in Africa is produced outside of Africa. So this is one sector really for which Africa has a huge comparative advantage. And that can bring the platform of infrastructure. As Eugene said, you need energy to process food, to store food, for all the issue of food safety. You will need roads to transport food. And, we mentioned the issue of youth. There is no other sector in Africa that can absorb the youth as agricultural sector. So we need to design an agricultural sector that is attractive to the youth. It can be gender-based. So agriculture, we can design for women, for girls, for males, and along the value chain from production, processing, distribution, all the way to the table. And of course, you will need funding. And so, for me, I think agriculture sector is one that we can target and now try to bring all the other components in terms of infrastructure, funding, education, health in some specific countries. And I believe that is a winning recipe.
Paul?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of go back on what was mentioned by Mr. Eugene. It's the importance of building partnerships and coalition building, because membership in I obviously like in organizations such as yours, or even like the United Nations associations, are comprised of individuals of various professional backgrounds. It's not a monolith. These are people that have expertise in various different fields, and by unifying those thoughts, you could definitely come out with a comprehensive plan to tackle any issue. In regards to issues in energy and climate change in general, in Africa, I could definitely provide the contact information for Dr. Richard Munang, who is the Regional African Climate Change Officer for the UN Department of Environmental Program. And I think he will be someone that will be more than willing to come to the table and hear about conversations about ways that we could definitely tap into the vast potential that you guys have insight on of the solar technology within Africa. One of the things that we're doing now in the United Nations Association of Westchester that we could definitely share and streamline a template to be done in Africa is the creation of a database of various organizations, nonprofits, or businesses in general that have mission statements that fall under the achievement of a sustainable development goal. So organizations that are dealing with women's rights, that are dealing with addressing, air quality, water quality, that are addressing with, they're helping address quality education, so that people can understand that these organizations exist within their communities, and that is a way that they could tap into what Mr. Jonathan Mwaru mentioned, local leadership for global goals. Because in part, for most individuals, unless they have, a forum such as this, people in New York aren't going to be able to get in contact with people in Africa. People in California may not be able to get in contact with people from Nigeria. But it's important that we could supply the resources for them to develop their own leadership locally within those areas, so that they could be able to have a more keen insight to resolve the issues, especially if these are issues within their own local community. And also, I guess just to close off, the empowerment of the youth is the most important thing. These are the future leaders that need to become, to be advocates now of the situations that they want to resolve. The great John Lewis, he was age 25 when he started participating in the marches for civil unrest. These are people that started very early in their lives to start advocating for the changes they want to see in their local communities. And that's something that needs to be streamlined to young people. And, through organizations that some of you may know, some of you that may exist in Africa, or even the United Nations Association, provide a wealth of professional resource to help people develop the skills that they may need to tap into that professional potential that they have within each of them. Whether it's modern United Nations conferences, which expose people to parliamentary procedures, or ways that they can get involved in the overall discourse of resolving issues with professional officials, or the overall exposure to the various organizations that are out there. So one of the things that I could say is promoting membership of the organization that you're affiliated with the organizations that exist that are actively addressing problems that could definitely fall under the umbrella of one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
You all have provided such a wealth of information, not just for our knowledge base, but for our strategic planning. And so one of the things that this dialogue did for us, thanks to Dr. Weaver and thanks to Ms. Brenda Smith and Bishop Lartey, is that it brought together people from different walks of life that can speak to the issues, and we'll certainly continue to find more young people and women who can help us not only speak to the issue, but so to also help combat the issues. And so we want to create a database. We want to create partnerships. And so those of you who have been a part of this dialogue, consider yourself partners of 400 Years Celebration as we begin to move forward. Those of you who are on Facebook and YouTube and on our website, you may go to our website, www.400yearscelebration.org, and join our organization, and we'll be sure to keep you posted of the work that we are doing. Because of a time constraint, we're going to ask that you all would stay right where you are, and we're going to bring on Bishop Barber, who is going to respond to some of the things that have gone on today. And I'm going to ask Bishop Lartey if he would give a brief introduction to Bishop Barber as he prepares to respond.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. McFadden. And before Bishop Barber comes, I want to ask John, the $150 billion that you said is for infrastructure. If Africa had available today, the $150 billion, how many countries in Africa will be blessed by those dollars?
What we have an average a number for across the continent that will move the share of investment from 3.5 to 4.5 across the continent. But yes, I can dig the exact number of countries. One of them is, of course, the DRC, which has a potential in terms of electricity for more than 40,000 megawatt. And that investment costs about $13 billion for over 10 to 15 years. So that's one country. And if DRC managed to develop its potential for electricity, it's almost like half of Africa can benefit from it. And that's only $13 billion. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you. We'll have to continue the conversation offline, because this is what we're talking about. If you have approximately 2 billion Black people on the planet, can you see a strategic plan that allows us to begin to develop our own corporations that can invest in Africa and have the kind of return on our investment that blesses us wherever we are? But we're talking more about that, John. I appreciate all of you. You've been fantastic. Let me present to us now Bishop William Barber. Bishop Barber is the president for the Poor People's Campaign, Bridge Builders. He's a pastor. He is an activist. He is a Christian. He is a lover of people. He is a mover and a shaker. God has blessed him with a tremendous mind, but not only does he have a tremendous mind, but he's willing to use his mind for the advancement of humanity. He served as the president of the NAACP here in North Carolina, did an outstanding job, and today he is moving throughout this nation, bringing awareness to the poverty in this country, and by the grace of God is changing the mindset of how the haves can begin to look out for the have-nots. And so I want to present to all of us one of the voices of prophetic word who has no problem speaking truth to power, His Excellency Bishop William Barber.
Bishop Lartey and all of you gathered, Bishop Lartey is my brother. We've known each other a long, long time. I deeply respect him, and his vision. And to all of you who've gathered here, I've been listening intently and intensely. And I'm extraordinarily moved by the depth and the wisdom and the vision. And I was asked to give somewhat of a response to that as a pastor that is in America, but certainly is connected to the continent through my DNA and through my theology and through the understanding that this is the very week that we remember the scripture in Matthew chapter 2, when the Lord said, I will call my son out of Africa, out of Egypt. I want to respond with some bullet points, because this is such a deep and necessary conversation, Bishop Lartey. First, I want us to just notice today where we're here. This would have been the 14th day of the boycotts, beginning with Rosa Parks sitting down in Montgomery in 1955. This would have been the 14th day. 7/7, right? When Rosa Parks was responding to the death of Emmett Till and saying, we need more than just for the killers of Emmett Till to be captured. We need a reconstruction of the American experiment. That's what the sit down was all about. The second reconstruction. Now, today, the boycott would last another 367 days from today. And a lot of times people don't understand. It wasn't like they sat down a week. Things got better. In fact, they got worse first. There were bombings. There were preachers that tried to undermine Dr. King and went to the power structure and offered compromise that had to be pushed back. So Dr. Lartey, from today forward, it would be another 367 days before the Supreme Court will rule. 367 more days from today that people, Black people, working with their white allies, said we will not ride until we are not only respected, but until this country is reconstructed. And they put economic pressure and moral pressure together. And 367 is a prime number. And so I think it is right for the day you all are saying that Africa must be prime time. You know, a prime number is a number you can't divide it. You can't compromise it. It's prime, right? We also gather here where we know Jesus said in Matthew 25, I will say to the nations, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you care about me? So forth and so on. And oftentimes we read that scripture and we actually diminish what it's saying, because some people think that means charity. They think that's a message to the church to help somebody who's hungry, help somebody who's sick, or it's a message to give out things from a personal or merely a corporate charitable perspective. But stop for a moment and go back and listen. I will say to the nations. That's the word, the ethnos in Greek, the structures. I will say to the structures. I will say to the governments. That's why anybody that talks about economic development and wants to let the government off the hook and say, how can we do this by ourselves? That's not Jesus's way. I will say to the ethnos, the races, the nations, the structures, the governments, when I was hungry, did your policies shift so that I could be fed? Because people are not poor and hurting, whether in America or in Africa, because they're lazy or immoral. I mean, there may be one or two, but the majority of it is structural. Just this, not a month ago, Pope Francis did a second encyclical. I had an opportunity, Bishop Lartey, to go to Rome at the Vatican and respond to his first encyclical on the environment and talk about race and labor. He just released a second encyclical where he called for a worldwide poor people's campaign. And in it, he said that the magic theories of trickle-down economics and neoliberalism are failing us. They are failing us. They are failing the whole world. And the Pope said, and because of that, the world is going backwards. because we're not focusing on the issues of poverty and economic development from a structural governmental standpoint. The forces of injustice are using the structures to get rich. And as Dr. King said, they give socialism to the corporations and give rugged individualism to poor folk. I heard my dear brother mention, he said $150 billion. What could be done with $150 billion? And I said to myself, that is so gracious of him to just say 150 billion. Because in this country, since COVID, just talk about America for a second. In the last 6 months, billionaires in America have made $900 billion off of COVID. $900 billion. Our military in America, if we cut $750 billion from the United States military right now, which has big implants on the continent of Africa, the United States would still have more money in its military budget than China, Russia, Iran, Iraq, and North Korea combined. We've even got to increase what we see as the kind of money that folk are dealing with and what's possible, right? We know any conversation about Africa has to deal with the World Bank and the control that it has had when it has given countries money and then held that over their head. So one of the things we've done in the Poor People's Campaign that I want to put on the table that I think made as a response to this conversation, we decided in the Poor People's Campaign early on, what are the 5 issues? What are the issues that connect to structural systemic poverty? What are the issues you have to address simultaneously? Since poverty is a structural issue, and there are 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that talk about where we should stand in relationship to the poor, and almost all of them deal with structural changes. The biggest sin in the Bible is idolatry, self-worship. The second biggest sin is mistreatment of the poor, the least of these, the women, the children. That's in scripture, over 2,000 scriptures. If you cut every scripture out in the Bible that tries to address the issue of poverty and economic inequality and injustice toward the least of these, the Bible would literally fall apart in your hands. So we decided in the Poor People's Campaign, when we looked at the data, that there are 5 issues you have to deal with: systemic racism in all of its forms, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, the war economy and militarism, and then we had to deal with the false narratives of religious nationalism, wherever they come from. And we said you can't even deal with poverty unless you deal with these issues. Now, let me give you a breakdown of what that means. For instance, in the issue of systemic poverty, we had heard that there were 35 million poor people in America, but then we had economists look at it and they said the measurement for poverty is 55 years old, and it was a bad measurement when it was first put into place. The truth of the matter, if you look at a living wage, there are 140 million people living in poverty and low wealth before COVID. 700 people dying a day from poverty and low wealth in America before COVID. 250,000 people dying a year before COVID. And yet poverty is hardly never talked about in our political discussion. Middle class, working people, not poverty, and low wage, people who are working every day, making less than living wage. The fact of the matter is we have 62 million people before COVID, before 30 million people lost their job. We had 62 million people in this country working for less than a living wage. And then when you disaggregate that according to race, we found out 61% of all Black people are poor and low wealth. Not 16%, not 20%, but 61%. That means there are only 39% of Black people in this country who live outside of poverty and low wealth. 54% of all Black people in this country make less than a living wage. Even now, when we talk about COVID, and they said, well, Black people are dying and being affected 3 to 5 times more. That's true, but it's only part of the truth. The truth is not Black people are being affected. Poor and low wealth Black people are being affected and die. Essential workers are being affected and die. We have to first get the right truth in order to be free. So one of the things responding to this conversation this morning, I would suggest that we need to have a moral economic in-depth audit of Africa. in a document, not all over the place. And in what's the real truth? Not what the World Bank says, right? What's the real truth about the racism that still happens to Africa? What's the real truth about poverty and low wealth in Africa and working poor folk? What's the real truth? We found out, going back to our study, and when it comes to ecological devastation in America, 4 million people get up every morning and buy unleaded gas, can't buy unleaded water. Right. We found out that for every 500,000 people that don't have health insurance, 2,800 die. 2,800 die. 6,000 almost for every 1 million people. So if you got 30 million people without health care, 6 times 30, 6,000 times 30 would be the number of people that die every year. Not because God called them home, but because the Congress people, all who get free health care, by the way, when they get elected, refuse to make sure their constituencies have what they have. Structural. So I would suggest in response, Bishop, we need a moral, economic, in-depth audit of Africa, because it's not a country, it's a continent. Then we need a moral, economic document that shows the disadvantage to the world for Africa to remain unimpoverished and underdeveloped. Not just the disadvantage to Black people and Africa, but the disadvantage to the whole world. Because the world is hindered. The world made its money, so much of the world, European and off of Africa, the slave trade. But the world also cannot move forward as long as Africa exists in desperation. And we have to make that case, that the moral and economic stability of the whole world is disadvantaged when Africa is not advantaged and advanced. That's one of the things you have to do, for instance, with racism. With racism, you can't deal with it by just talking about how it affects Black people. You have to talk about how it is targeted at Black people and indigenous people and brown people, but then you have to show how it ultimately undermines the entire democracy. That's the case that King made. King said, look, I wouldn't be doing this, but in America, you said on paper such and such and such a thing, and I'm gonna hold you to what you said on paper. And then King said on one occasion, because you cannot keep a man in the ditch unless you stay in the ditch with him. We've got to make the case of how destructive it is to the whole world, to the poor and low-wealth people across the world, when Africa is disadvantaged. So we need a moral economic in-depth audit. We need a moral economic in-depth study on the disadvantage to the whole world. And then we need a moral economic in-depth action plan. What has to happen? What are the 5 areas? And what has to happen? What are the structures that have to be transformed? Because we have to talk about what Bishop Lartey said, the 2 billion Black people on this planet and the amount of money we possess and the ability to develop corporations. But in doing that, we also cannot give away all the money that government has, because that's ours too, right? You know, that's one of the reasons I fight for Black business development, but I'm never gonna walk away from the $1 trillion budget that America has, because that's ours too. And the corporations shouldn't be the only ones accessing that money. Because let me tell you something, greedy corporations use the government. Greedy corporations take every piece of dime they can get from contracts to keeping their wages low and then forcing their workers to have to go get subsistence from the government, i.e. food stamps, SNAP. That's the way corporations bleed the government. And so we cannot walk away from the structures. Last thing, Bishop Lartey, as I was listening into your great panelists, I think that if the church is going to get involved, is going to seriously move in this issue, just like Dr. King said, there were 3 areas, racism, poverty, and militarism, that you have to address if you're serious about addressing the social ailments of the world. And if we're serious about looking at racism towards Africa, poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, infrastructure underdevelopment, and how the war economy and militarism continues to impact the continent, and then how false nationalism. You know, I was just part of a signature letter that challenged the president of Nigeria for some of the stuff he was doing that looked just like what Trump was doing. We got to be across the board. Our morality cannot be limited. But if that's the case, here's the last two things. We're going to have to make the public case that the world can no longer exist the way it is, and that Africa be left out of the G7 and the G20. Now that's a hell of a, excuse me for that. You get into that conversation, folk ain't gonna like it. You know, that's the kind of stuff get you crucified, because you really get down to the bottom. But if we're serious, and those of us who follow him who was crucified, because you cannot do all of this through charity. You cannot do all of this through corporate. It's got to be through the structure. And it makes no sense that when the G7 meets, Canada is there, France is there, Germany is there, Italy is there, Japan is there, the United Kingdom is there, the United States is there, the European Union is there, Russia used to be there, and not one country from Africa. It makes no sense that the G20 meets, and when they meet, this is what they're talking about, development and economic. The only country from Africa is South Africa. We have to, hearing what I've heard today, we have to demand, since everybody's making money off of Africa, hello, since everybody is trying to get military bases in Africa, since everybody benefits and have benefited for 400 years, there should be no G7s and global 7s and global 20s and Africa not be at the table, fully at the table, when we're talking about the economics and equality in the world. So that's my response. I hope it's helpful. I'm certainly learning and have learned so much. And I look forward, Bishop Lartey, to this. I've been invited. We've gotten some calls from Africa, various places, to come after COVID and talk about the Poor People's Campaign and our work, and why there needs to be a worldwide Poor People's Campaign, if you will, to deal with these injustices across. And we in the church must kill this final exegesis. I know no preacher on this call ever said it, but bishops, you need to make sure your members don't, your preachers under you, when they say the poor will be with you always, and they use that as an excuse, that is the most heretical interpretation of that scripture. You got to go back to that scripture. It was pulled out of Deuteronomy. And when Jesus said the poor shall be with you always, you got to read what he meant as a good Hebrew. If you go back to Deuteronomy, it says the poor will be always with you because you won't change the structures. It didn't say there was an inevitability. It didn't say it had to be. It didn't say you say that as a way of justifying not challenging the structures of injustice. He was saying the poor with you always because of the sinful injustice and the unjust structures of this world. We may not be able to change them all, because some things are not ultimately going to be changed until the Lord changes everything. But I do believe we have to be in the business of saying what's right, fighting for what's right, working to change what's right. Even if it doesn't all get changed, I think we'll be held accountable if we don't try to change it. That's
wow. Wow.
God bless you.
Bishop Barber, thank you so much for the nuggets that you have shared, for challenging us, for just stirring us up. And then that last one, correct exegesis of the text is crucial and important, so that we don't use the word against folks, but we use the word to help people. Wow, such an awesome response, such an awesome morning that we have had. And we want to thank our panelists and Bishop Barber, Dr. Jonathan Weaver, Bishop Reddick, Bishop Richardson, for the marvelous way in which you have shared and responded to us today from the depths of your heart. And like we said, this is just the beginning. This is not a conversation just to be having a conversation. This is a conversation that is leading us to a call to action, a call to action. And so we've made some new friends over the weekend, over the last 3 days, and we are going to continue these relationships and hope to build other relationships with people that you know, so that we can begin to create this strategic plan that will be a blessing to all of us. So again, to our panelists, thank you so much for giving of your time and effort and energy and passion this morning. I'm going to come back, but I'm going to allow Bishop Lartey to present our next responder so that we might also hear from him.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. McFadden, to our panelists, to Bishop Barber. He just picked up another assignment, and it's going to be the Bishop Barber Project to ensure that Africa is at the table of the G8, G7, G20, whatever it is. That will be your legacy to this entire universal dialogue, to give us the platform, give us the strategy whereby we can work toward making it possible. Because I think you're absolutely correct. Most of, if not half of, the world have benefited from us continuously, even as we speak, and oftentimes left from the table. So we are publicly announcing that that's going to be the Barber Project to ensure that Africa is at that table. Thank you so much, Doctor, for challenging us, and to our panelists. I want us to just imagine what it would be like to raise $150 billion for Africa. It can be done, you know. And I hope we go to God in prayers to show us how that can be done. It gives me a great pleasure at this time to present Bishop Kenneth Monroe. Bishop Kenneth Monroe is a very dear friend of Africa. When he was elected bishop, he was assigned to Africa. And not only was he assigned to Africa and has done tremendous work on the continent, but even today, he serves as the chair for our global missions work, which is the work that continues the work of dealing with not just Africa, but all of Zion's work across the world. And so we're so delighted that Bishop Battle, who is our senior bishop, asked Bishop Monroe to come today and to not only represent him, but to speak in response to what we have heard today. As we have heard today, it is one of the most important subject matters, talking about infrastructure. If anyone knows about the infrastructure, Bishop Kenneth Monroe knows something about it. Today, he serves as our presiding bishop for Eastern North Carolina, a fantastic organizer, a pulpiteer par excellence, one who is indeed a servant of the Most High God. Please let me present to all of us His Excellency, Bishop Kenneth Monroe. Bishop Monroe, welcome.
To Bishop Lartey and my friend and brother of long years, I had the privilege of serving his family while I was presiding bishop of Liberia. Bishop Reddick, we thank God for his masterful message this morning. My schoolmate. To Bishop A.J. Richardson, I've always thought highly of him. And it's interesting that Bishop Lartey, Bishop Reddick, Bishop Richardson, and myself all served as bishops in Africa. Bishop Barber, who I always admired, and to Dr. Weaver, we are grateful to his ministry that he brings to the metropolitan Washington area, as well as to the continent of Africa. And to Dr. McFadden, we're grateful for the service she continues to give to the church. I'm honored to be here and to respond. I said, they say going to respond. I know it was some tremendous messages given here today. It took me back to my days in Africa as I listened to the panel. And I want to thank that panel for their presentations today. I've experienced what it is to have no power in Africa. You'll hear more about that in a minute. But I wish to thank Bishop Lartey and all of you for initiating and having this discussion about our responsibility. And I say our responsibility as people of God to the politics, to the problems, as well as to the potentials and possibilities of our brothers and sisters in the continent of Africa. Having served in Ghana, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, not only am I aware of some of the challenges that our people face there, but I am aware of the choices the people of Africa must take and make. Yet as people of the Western world, that's us, I'm not sure if we really understand the rich culture and the possibilities of this great continent of Africa. This dialogue has raised some very important and concerns that must be addressed by all of us, and particularly those of us who lead the church in the Western world. Moreover, I'm not sure if our leaders, pastors, bishops, and lay people, and other people of different institutions and companies really understand our purpose of being and being able to have what we have in the 21st century, particularly the Christian church. It appears to me that the church of the West is confused about her purpose, and in many instances has sought to embrace a welfare mentality. We look to be cared for rather than be the church God has called us to become. And that is the church who does miracles. St. John 14:12-13, and I heard Dr. Weaver mention this passage of scripture. It says, Jesus was saying, he said, I tell you the truth, anyone who has faith in me will do what I've been doing. He will do even greater things than these because I'm going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name so that the Son may bring glory to the Father. Also in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, Jesus is calling for us to examine our responsibility as followers of him. If we are to serve God and faithfully, if we are to be the people of God, we must be responsible people and love all people as he does. And of course, it is without question that we are to love people with the same intensity as well as love them responsibly. Before this teaching of Jesus, men and women were not instructed to love all people. But in this lesson, Jesus seems to introduce a different attitude and response to people, even those who perhaps are considered our enemies. By no means does Jesus eliminate the command to love. And I heard Dr. Weaver bring that out tremendously this morning. Nevertheless, he just upgrades the responsibility of love. There are several commands given in this text that upgrades the mission that the followers of Jesus must pursue. But perhaps we have gone too far in our ministries as the Church of God without upgrades. Everything around us has experienced an upgrade except the ministry or the service that we must give as the people of God. We are still attempting to do ministry, to serve the way our forefathers and parents and ancestors did years ago. Whether we have noticed it or not, we are living in a different and even more difficult world. If we are to be the people of change, we must change to suit the times as well as the people we must serve. Automobiles, televisions, telephones, computers, houses, education, and most social aspects of our society have changed or experienced an upgrade except the church or the people of God. The church continues to do the same things it has always done and expect change. The people of Africa are in need. People in America are in need. But our understanding of our mission and service continues to be the same. We are involved in the same rituals and approaches to ministry, but are expecting a change in the behavior of people. In most instances, we are not able to reach the people as we need to reach or minister to the people that need ministry. No doubt we are comfortable doing what we do, but in the same time, we need to upgrade. Not only does Jesus emphasize the need to upgrade our approach in the 5th chapter of Matthew, but also if we would review the parable of the talents in the 25th chapter, we are able to note the importance of upgrading our resources. See, 2 of the men in the lesson on the talent upgraded their responsibility as servants by demonstrating good management. In this lesson, it would appear that to indicate that whatever is placed in our charge becomes our responsibility to upgrade it or make it better than when it was when we first was given to us. As people of God, we cannot do ministry. We cannot serve for a whole year and not bring one person to Christ or even do anything that is not miraculous. If that has happened with us, somehow, somewhere along the way, we have missed our calling or perhaps have just minimized our service. Nonetheless, in order to initiate an upgrade in our service to God, to people, and particularly to our brothers and sisters in Africa, we must understand the purpose of our ministry. In the lesson found in Matthew chapter 5, it is important to note that Jesus desired that we love, not necessarily from the heart, because what he is asking for us is not about our feelings, but about responsible action. And we've heard that over and over again today. The love Jesus desired for us to employ has to do with our will, or a demonstration of the mind, or the determination of our mind. We love not because we want to, but because we need to love. I was reading a book entitled By Design or Default. It was written by Kevin Gerald, suggests that the importance of our being intentional about creating change and developing leadership. Instead of our embracing and following the cultures we have been following for years, he suggests that we become a culture, or perhaps design a new culture for ministry. More often than we should, we find ourselves accepting the norms, the values which may be outdated, no longer workable or suitable for the people we are called to save as well as serve. But we should be careful as we employ a new culture. You know, a few years ago, while serving as the Bishop of Western West Africa and residing in the Episcopal residence in Accra, Ghana, the electrical power went off during the early morning. I rose from my bed to check the circuit breaker or the electrical box. And upon examination, I discovered that the main power switch had jumped off. So I reset the switch and the power resumed, but only for a few minutes. After resetting the switch 3 or 4 times, I decided not to bother the electrical box anymore, but wait until we get an electrician, because evidently there was some kind of glitch with the system. The whole matter concerned me greatly because we had just replaced the entire electrical box the day before. Nevertheless, the electricity was still malfunctioning. Even though the box was new, we were still helpless and unable to get much done because we were without power. When the electrician arrived the next morning, he discovered the reason the power continued to go off. Upon his investigation, he discovered that the new box was not big enough to transfer the kind of power necessary to maintain all the electrical features of the house. In other words, the new box we had purchased did not fit. The box was in place. It tried to do the job, but it is not equipped to handle that amount of power. My brothers and sisters, upgrades are necessary for productivity. But please be sure we have upgraded and not downgraded because we feel it is cheaper or it sounds good. But it is not equipped to handle the kind of power necessary to do the job. As difficult as it is to find able-bodied people, and I listened to you talk about we need electricians, lawyers, we need people, educators, all to do the work of ministry and serve the people of Africa. It is imperative for all of us to be prayerful, watchful, and intentional about securing the right persons to manage the ministry and mission of our hurting world. Without question, my brothers and sisters, the Lord has given us the authority to maximize the mission, the service. Listen, we are a chosen generation. We're not going to make a difference without being called to do what has to be done. And understand, God has called us to do the miraculous. But we are a called generation. We are a chosen people. We are a royal priesthood. We are a holy nation. We are a peculiar people, that we should show forth the praises of him who has called us out of darkness into this marvelous light. My brothers and sisters, our goal, as we have talked all the last 2-3 days, is to maximize our purpose, our mission. And the way we do it is by managing the way we serve. The words of Kirk Franklin clearly appeals to us to keep us as we seek to become responsible to one another. Kirk Franklin tells us, he said, I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's family. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is his will that every need be supplied. You're important to me. I need you to survive. May God bless you and keep you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Monroe, for those powerful words and for your work over on the continent and the experience that you bring to us today. And we know and hope that you'll continue to partner with us through the Board of Global Missions, of which both of us are a part of, and we know that the work will continue. We are nearing the end of this 3-day phenomenal dialogue, and it has been rich. It has been amazing. We have learned a lot, at least I have. I think you all have too, by virtue of the comments that you have shared on YouTube and Facebook and in the chat. But we want you to know that this is not the end. And so a couple of announcements that I want to make before I share with you our next steps. And that is many of our panelists and presenters mentioned books. And so we hope that you wrote those down. If not, we'll make sure that we get all of the titles of those books. But 2 books that we want to make sure that you get, and I'll get the technician to put those up at some point, and that is Ambassador Eric Hanna's book, Africa 101, and then Bishop Larte's book, Overcoming Evil with Good. Both of them, one is a foundational book that talks about Africa and some of the basic necessities and the basic rudiments of what we ought to know about Africa as our heritage. And then Bishop Larte's book also lays out a very comprehensive understanding of what's going on and the next steps that we need to do. And so please get in touch with us on how you may purchase either one of those books. I do believe that Ambassador Eric Hanna's book, you'll have to go to her website, and we'll put that on our website. And Bishop Larte's book, you can make sure that you contact us, and we will make sure that you get that. Those 2 works, very important works, along with some of the other books that was shared with us today. And so we are responsible. And in our responsibility, we cannot afford to be ignorant. And the word ignorant simply means not knowing, not understanding. And so we do not want to be found ignorant. So you've got 2 great, reliable resources that you can look to in order to get some of the information that you need in order to inform you and raise your awareness. But, you know, we live in a technology age where you can also Google some of the things, some of the organizations, some of the books that were mentioned this weekend. We also encourage you to join some of the organization, Pan-African Collective. Dr. We've already invited you to their monthly gathering where he brings in speakers from on the continent and other places who further create awareness for us. And so I'm sure that he would not be against you joining the Pan-African Collective. Again, Google it. You will find all of the information that you need. We also want you to join the 400-Year Celebration Inc. at 400yearcelebration.org. to keep up with what's going on, to be informed with what we are doing, to partner with us as we partner with many of those who shared with us in this last 3 days. It has been so amazing, so informative. Somebody texted me and said, nobody's asking any questions on social media. And my response to them was, perhaps it's because the information has been so rich, the information has been so much that you're not sure what to ask, that we have to learn how to digest the information first before we can begin to ask the questions. And so hopefully your spirit, your mind, your soul has been touched these last 3 days, and hopefully it has stirred up something in you so that you want to learn more, that you want to grow, and that you want to be a part of. It was good that you joined us for this conversation, but I hope that it does not stop there. I hope that you get involved. And then the final thing before I lay out part of our strategic plan is that I hope that you will give. I hope that you will give to 400 years celebration so that we might continue the work that we have begun, so that as we partner with Mercy Ship, that we might provide some of the proceeds that come from what we raised these last 3 days. We'll go to Mercy Ship and we'll add the rest, but we want to partner with Mercy Ship so that others may receive the surgeries that they need in order to live a healthy, whole, and productive life. And so you may give at Cash App 400 years celebration. You may mail in your payments to 808 South Lawrence Street, Montgomery, Alabama 36104. You may continue to keep in touch with us via our Facebook page as well as our YouTube page to keep up with what's going on and any questions that you might have and ways to give. We certainly want to receive your gift. And so let me briefly share. There's so much that has been sparked out of this conversation, but yet let me share before I present our CEO and founder that some of the major next steps that we're going to do is to establish the 12 Elements Commission. And if any of you received our initial save the date, and I don't know if our technician has that, our save the date flyer, it listed 12 areas in which we plan to focus on this dialogue. And we just simply broke it down into 3 categories for the last 3 days. But as you see on the screen, there are 12 areas, including dual citizenship, including the infrastructure, including the economic and educational and health disparities, as well as other things that we're going to focus on. So we're going to establish each one of those into a commission who will begin to do the work. So we want to get work done in the midst of, in between this dialogue and the next dialogue. We want to begin to get to work. We're going to establish a working committee to plan for the 100 Years United Universal Dialogue agenda for Africa and the people of African origin worldwide. So again, this conversation is just the beginning. And then Bishop will come in just a few moments to appoint the following directors: the Transatlantic Memorial Service, the Saturday program,
And then we're going to, make sure that all of the news entities of the AME Zion, CME churches, and other significant news organizations receives information about what we've done for the last 3 days and some of the organizations that we will partner with and where we plan on going from here. So again, this is just the beginning. There's so much work to do. We're going to focus on our young people, bringing them to the table. We're going to focus on gender equity as we bring more women to the table, because we know that our women are doing the work as well. So we're going to be busy. And we want you to join us in our busyness, as we are not just busy for busy's sake, but productive in doing what we set out to do. And so I want to personally thank you for allowing me to be your host and your moderator for these last 3 days. Thank you for your support and kind words that you have shared with me. Know that we're about to get busy. We're about to get to work, and we hope that you will partner with us in order to get the work done. And so it is now my pleasure to present again the CEO and founder of 400 Years Celebration, Inc., Bishop Seth Olarte. Bishop, take it away.
Thank you so very, very much, Dr. McFadden, for all that you have done to bring us to this moment. Certainly, we want to acknowledge our missionary supervisor, Mrs. Jacqueline Inez Williams-Lotte. We want to acknowledge and say a word of thanks to Bishop Reddick, Bishop Richardson, Bishop Monroe, to Dr. Weaver, and to all of our panelists and all of our presenters. We want to say thank you so much for helping us to begin this dialogue. And I'm so glad that I believe the word help is being replaced with partnership, that what we are looking for, not necessarily a help, but we're looking for partners in this journey. As Dr. McFadden pointed out, this for us is not just another conversation, but it is actually work that we've been praying about, work that we've been struggling with, and by the grace of God, we are here today to give birth to this new era, this new approach, because we believe that in order for Africa to rise again, her children must come to the table and have a common dialogue. In order for Africa to rise again, we must not allow tribalism to become a barrier. If Africa is to rise again, her children must have a right to the continent. They were taken from there. They were turned into slaves. They want to come back. We need the nations of Africa to open up her arms and embrace her children once again, as the Republic of Ghana has done to have dual citizenship. All other African nations need to do similarly, because when John said that what Africa needs is some $150 billion to restore its infrastructure, you minus that from the 3-point-something trillion dollars that just the 40 million African American earn in this country. So it is possible. It is possible. So let me thank all of you. Thank Dr. Smith for her input, and the future looks bright for the relationship with us and the United Nations. We have some real tangible plans that can bring about transformation. And what we heard today, for example, the idea of taking one country and working with that country as a model of transformation, those are the kinds of things that we will be doing as we move along. But let me just say that this universal dialogue is serious about impacting the future of Africans and African worldwide. So today we want to formally appoint the Reverend Farhad B. Masael. He's one of our ministers in the AME Zion Church at Galbraith in Washington. We are appointing him as our director for the Blood Crying Out Transatlantic Memorial Service. What is that? When you go back and read history, millions of people were being brought from Africa to the shores of America, Europe, and other parts. And millions of people were thrown overboard in the Atlantic Ocean. And I don't know yet, and if there is, please, I stand corrected, but I don't know yet of any formal attempt to apologize, to repent, and ask forgiveness for those people buried in the sea. This memorial service that will be held yearly is an attempt. You see, for some of you, you may be so scientific that you do not understand the metaphysical dynamic of how we are related to the universe. But I believe those of you who are of the faith community, you know what the Bible says, that righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach to any people. So there is a connectivity in our action, in our behavior to what happens to the world. And so we believe that if we begin to say to those persons thrown overboard that we recognize, we repent, and we're sorry, I believe something can happen to the rest of Europe. Let me tell you what's going on. It was around 1900s when the slave trade began to dissipate. But it's about the same time that storms, real violent storms, began to hit US and other parts where slaves were carried. And if you look at what has happened since 1900 until now, you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars. Every year, the storms that emanate from the waters of Africa, could it be that those souls are crying out for attention? Could it be that those souls that have been thrown overboard to be eaten up by sharks, their bodies were, but their spirits were not, are crying out? And that's the reason we have this blood crying out movement, so that we can address senseless murders, senseless killing of our people. And we need to encourage ourselves to stop killing each other. But this is what will happen, that every year we are going to have, as a part of this United Universal Dialogue, a memorial service to remember those souls thrown overboard and to say to them, their lives, their life are just as meaningful as the rest of us. For the Bible said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. God so loved the world. It includes those who were thrown overboard. And so today we're so happy, we're so delighted that Pastor Marshall has agreed to serve in that capacity. There are other positions that we will be filling as we move along, because we want you to know that this United Universal Dialogue is not just another fleeting conversation because we have nothing to do. But deep within our souls, deep within our hearts, we want to make sure so that our young brothers and sisters from the United Nations, from all of our faith community and business community, as Dr. Barber said, there has to be an audit of the moral fabric of that continent. And all of us stand in the judgment seat of God. But by the grace of God, his grace and mercy will help us to make sure that 400 years from now, the next generation will not be like us, but they will find a better Africa, a better world in which to express the love of God, the love of humanity, and love for themselves. Again, thank you all so much for spending these few days with us. We hope, we pray, a light has been turned on in your heart, because we believe together Africa can rise again. Let us pray. And now may the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God, the sweet communion of the Holy Spirit, rest, rule, and abide with each one of us now and forevermore. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. We thank our technician, Brother Darren Kent, who has done a masterful job of keeping on and having a wonderful time. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and all of you. Thank you. God bless you. And we'll see you very soon at the next telecast.
Thank you so much, Bishop. And the debriefing we'll schedule for another time. But thank you again so much for everyone joining us. Have a blessed and wonderful day. Do so on purpose. Bye-bye. More than 400 years ago, Africans were brought to this country and enslaved. And for 401 years, we've struggled for health equity and equality, for wealth equity, to be treated as human beings and not second-class citizens. It was a travesty what happened, but the 400 Years Celebration Organization helps to create awareness, educate. The purpose was to gather people from all walks of life, entertainment, politics, athletics, education, to celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans since being in this country. We know that we have a long way to go, and the United Universal Dialogue was the beginning of having conversations of Africa and African Americans and Africans worldwide. We want you to be a part of the movement. My name is Kathy Thomas McFadden, and I serve as the Executive Director of the 400 Years Celebration Incorporated. And under the leadership, guidance, and vision of our leader, CEO, and founder, Bishop Seth Olarte, we want to invite you to partner with us as we create change, as we celebrate, as we create a 100-year strategic plan to strengthen the infrastructure of Africa, to bridge the gap between the continent and the diaspora, to begin to create awareness for all peoples, that they might understand the rich wealth and heritage of the African people and their descendants. So join us, visit us at www.400yearscelebration and partner with us financially. Partner with us as we begin to create a movement to move forward. And we ask that you would join us as we join others who are already doing the work. We appreciate your support and we look forward to seeing you in the future.